Welcome to the Crime for Sleep channel. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Story 1. I still remember the first note I found, its edges curling beneath a loose corner of wallpaper in what would become my bedroom. The paper was yellowed, crisp with age, yet the handwriting remained sharp and deliberate. I hadn't even finished moving in, cardboard boxes still stacked in precarious towers throughout the apartment, when my fingers caught that small imperfection in the wall covering. The gentle tug revealed words that shouldn't have been there. Leave while you still can, Hannah. My name is Hannah. The apartment on Cypress Lane had been vacant for nearly 3 years before I signed the lease. The rent was surprisingly affordable for the neighborhood, a fact I'd initially attributed to the building's age and the unit's outdated fixtures. The property manager had seemed eager, perhaps too eager, to have someone occupy the space again. He'd mentioned the previous tenant had left suddenly, but such stories are common in rental properties. People move on, circumstances change. I hadn't thought to question it further. The apartment itself was a typical pre-war build. High ceilings, hardwood floors that creaked with every step, windows that let in streams of amber light during late afternoon. The walls were covered in layers of wallpaper, at least 3 deep in some rooms, creating a palimpsest of decor choices from decades past. I'd planned to strip it all eventually, but in those first few weeks I was content to simply exist in the space, to let the apartment reveal itself to me gradually. And reveal itself it did. The second note appeared 3 days later, this time behind a loose baseboard in the kitchen. I hadn't been looking for it, I'd simply been cleaning, running a damp cloth along the edges of the floor when my fingers caught another piece of paper. This one was newer, the paper still white, the ink still dark. They're watching through the vents. They always listen, Hannah. I found myself standing perfectly still after reading those words, suddenly aware of the ventilation grate above the refrigerator. The apartment was quiet except for the gentle hum of the refrigerator and my own breathing, which seemed too loud in the stillness. I told myself it was a prank, perhaps left by previous tenants to unsettle whoever moved in next. Yet I couldn't shake the feeling of being observed, of eyes tracking my movements through the apartment's hidden spaces. Detective Morgan Reeves had the kind of patience that only comes from decades of investigating cold cases. When I finally called the police after finding the third note, the walls aren't thick enough to keep them out. Hannah, tucked behind a loose tile in the bathroom, it was Reeves who responded. She sat at my kitchen table, her notebook open before her, her pen making occasional marks as I explained the situation. She didn't rush me, didn't dismiss my concerns as paranoia or overreaction. Instead, she asked methodical questions about the apartment, about the notes, about my own history. "Do you know anything about the previous tenant?" she asked, her voice steady and uninflected. I shook my head, just that they left suddenly. The property manager wasn't forthcoming with details. Detective Reeves nodded slowly, making another note. "Would you mind if I took these notes for analysis? We can check for fingerprints, compare handwriting samples." I handed over the 3 notes I'd found, each sealed in a plastic bag as Reeves had instructed over the phone. As she carefully placed them in her evidence folder, she mentioned casually, "The property management company that owns this building has had some issues in the past. Nothing concrete, but there have been complaints." "What kind of complaints?" I asked, feeling a chill despite the apartment's warmth. "Maintenance workers entering without notice, missing personal items, tenants reporting strange noises in the walls." She closed her folder with deliberate care. Nothing that ever led to formal charges. That night after Detective Reeves left, I found myself studying the walls of my apartment with new attention. The layers of wallpaper suddenly seemed less like an aesthetic choice and more like an attempt to cover something up. I ran my fingers along the seams where wall met ceiling, where baseboards met floor, searching for more hidden messages. I found nothing, but the sensation of being watched persisted. I began researching the building's history the next day. The local library kept archives of the town's newspaper, and the librarian seemed unsurprised by my interest. "That building on Cypress?" she asked, her voice lowered slightly. "You're not the first to come asking." The microfiche revealed scattered reports over the years, complaints about property management, an investigation into building code violations that was mysteriously dropped, and one small article from 3 years ago about a tenant who had filed a harassment claim against the building owner before disappearing. The tenant's name was not Hannah, it was Elise Chen, but the coincidence of timing with my apartment's vacancy was difficult to ignore. When I returned home that evening, the sunset casting long shadows through my windows, I found the fourth note. This one was different, freshly written, the ink still slightly damp to the touch, placed not hidden in the wall but prominently on my kitchen counter. "They're coming tonight. Leave now, Hannah." My hands trembled as I called Detective Reeves. The rational part of my mind suggested an intruder, someone with access to my apartment who was playing an elaborate, cruel prank. Yet another part wondered if the walls themselves were trying to communicate with me, if some echo of past events was bleeding through into the present. Reeves arrived within 20 minutes, bringing with her a forensics technician who dusted for fingerprints while she and I spoke in low tones by the door. "The handwriting on the first 3 notes matches samples we have from lease applications submitted by previous tenants," she said, her expression carefully neutral. "Different people, different years, but this new one." She glanced toward the kitchen counter where the technician worked. "We'll need to compare it." "Someone has been in my apartment," I said, the reality of the situation finally settling into my bones with a cold certainty. "It appears so," Reeves agreed. "We've been investigating the property management company for months now. There have been reports of cameras installed in apartments, of maintenance staff with duplicate keys entering without permission." "For what purpose?" I asked, though part of me already suspected the answer. "Control, information, sometimes blackmail." She hesitated before adding, "We believe the previous tenant, Elise Chen, discovered something she wasn't supposed to know." That night I stayed in a hotel while police officers maintained surveillance on my apartment. By morning they had what they needed. Footage of the building manager using a key to enter my unit shortly after midnight, placing something in the wall behind a section of loose wallpaper before leaving. When they arrested him, they found dozens of keys, labeled with apartment numbers, and notebooks filled with details about tenants' daily routines, conversations, and personal habits. In the days that followed, as the investigation expanded to include the property owner and several maintenance workers, forensic teams systematically removed sections of wallpaper from my apartment. Behind the layers, they discovered more notes, some warning of surveillance, others detailing specific conversations that had taken place in the apartment, proof that every word spoken there had been recorded and monitored. The most disturbing discovery came from behind the bathroom mirror, a small journal belonging to Elise Chen, detailing her growing awareness of being watched and her plan to gather evidence against the property managers. The final entry, dated 3 years earlier, reads simply, "If anything happens to me, look beneath the floorboards in the bedroom closet." When Detective Reeves called me to the apartment to witness what they'd found there, I wasn't prepared for the contents. Dozens of USB drives containing surveillance footage from multiple apartments in the building, spanning years. and a final note written in Elise's hand but signed with my name with Hannah. To whoever finds this, they chose you because you live alone, because you're vulnerable, because you won't be missed immediately. I'm using your name as protection. If they find this note too soon, they'll wait for you instead of coming for me tonight. I'm sorry, Hannah. Elise Chen's body was eventually found buried in the building's basement, hidden behind a false wall. The property owner and 3 employees were charged with her murder, along with multiple counts of invasion of privacy, harassment, and blackmail. I never returned to live in that apartment. Sometimes I still dream of those walls, of words appearing and disappearing like ghosts trying to communicate across time. In those dreams, I'm writing notes and hiding them for someone else to find, warning a stranger who doesn't yet know they're in danger, and I always sign them with my name, Hannah. Because in the end, we were all the same person to them, just another tenant, just another life they felt entitled to observe, control, and ultimately take if necessary. Just another Hannah leaving messages that might never be found in time. Story 2. I've spent 23 years investigating peculiar cases across 12 states, but nothing quite compares to what happened at the Elmwood Grand Hotel. This isn't a story about blood spatter or forensic evidence. It's about something far more unsettling, the feeling of being watched while you sleep. The case file landed on my desk on a Tuesday morning in November. Outside my window, rain tapped gently against the glass, creating a soft rhythm that filled my small office. The manila folder was thin, unusual for a case transfer, containing only a single police report, 3 photographs, and a hotel brochure with gold-embossed lettering. I remember the weight of the paper between my fingers as I opened it, the slight resistance of the folder's crisp edges. The Elmwood Grand stood as the crown jewel of downtown, its Art Deco façade rising 15 stories above the city streets. Built in 1928, it had maintained its reputation for luxury and discretion across nearly a century. The kind of place where politicians met mistresses and business deals worth millions were sealed with handshakes over bourbon. The hotel prided itself on privacy, which made what happened there all the more disturbing. Sarah Keller checked into the Elmwood Grand on October 3rd. A pharmaceutical sales representative from Minneapolis, she traveled frequently for work and had stayed at the hotel 6 times before. The front desk clerk remembered her polite, efficient, never any complaints. Room 712 was assigned to her, a standard suite on the 7th floor, facing east toward the river. I was exhausted that night, Sarah told me when I interviewed her 3 weeks later. Her voice was steady, but her fingers kept tracing the rim of her coffee cup, around and around. I'd flown in from Chicago, had a late dinner at the hotel bar, then went straight up to sleep. The hotel's security footage confirmed her movements. In the dimly lit bar, Sarah sat alone at the counter, her posture gradually slumping as fatigue settled in. At 10:43 p.m., she signed her check, gathered her laptop bag, and walked to the elevators. The cameras captured her stepping inside. The next footage showed her emerging on the 7th floor, walking down the carpeted hallway, her keycard accessing room 712. What happened next is where the ordinary gives way to something else entirely. Sarah woke around 2:30 a.m., disoriented and thirsty. The hotel room was dark except for the faint glow of the alarm clock and the thin strip of light beneath the door. She made her way to the bathroom for a glass of water, and as she returned to bed, she noticed something unusual about the hallway light. Instead of the straight line she expected, there was a break in it, as if someone were standing outside her door. I froze, she told me, just stood there holding my water, watching that shadow beneath the door. It didn't move for what felt like minutes. Eventually, the shadow shifted and disappeared. Sarah, deciding it was probably another guest returning to their room, went back to sleep. But something about the incident left her uneasy, a feeling that lingered into morning. The next day passed without incident. Client meetings, a business lunch, more meetings. Sarah returned to the hotel around 6 p.m. and decided to walk the full length of her floor, something she often did in hotels to stretch her legs after a day of sitting. The 7th floor had 24 rooms, 12 on each side of a long hallway that ended in a fire exit. But as she approached the end of the corridor, something caught her attention. "There was a door I hadn't noticed before," she said. "Not the fire exit, but another door just before it. It was the same color as the wall, with just a simple brass knob." Curious, Sarah tried the handle. It turned easily in her hand. The door opened to reveal another hotel room immaculately kept, with the bed perfectly made and not a speck of dust visible on any surface. The room appeared to be a mirror image of her own, with one significant difference. It had no number on the door, inside or out. "I thought maybe I'd found some kind of model room," Sarah explained. "You know, the one they show potential guests when the regular rooms are occupied." She stepped inside, noting the stillness of the air. The room felt untouched, yet not stale, as if it had been cleaned that very morning. The curtains were drawn back, revealing the same eastern view of the river she had from her own room. On the desk sat a hotel notepad and pen, positioned at a perfect angle. Everything was in its place, presenting a picture of flawless hospitality. That's when Sarah noticed the nightstand. On its polished surface sat a silver frame containing a photograph. She moved closer, expecting to see some generic hotel art, a city skyline perhaps, or a nature scene. Instead, she found herself looking at an image that made her blood run cold. It was a photograph of her asleep in bed, not just any bed, the very bed in this room. The image showed Sarah lying on her right side, one hand tucked under her pillow, exactly the way she slept in her own room the night before. The photograph had been taken from above, from an angle that suggested someone standing at the foot of the bed. "I don't remember running," Sarah told me, her voice dropping to a whisper. But suddenly I was back in the hallway, gasping for breath. She immediately went to the front desk, where she spoke with the night manager, a man named Robert Gaines. He'd been with the hotel for 12 years and knew every corner of the building. When Sarah described the room, Gaines looked puzzled. "Ma'am, there is no room at the end of that hallway," he told her. "Just rooms 724 and 725, then the fire exit." Insisting she wasn't mistaken, Sarah convinced Gaines to accompany her back to the 7th floor. They walked together down the carpeted hallway, past her own room, all the way to the end. The door she had found earlier was gone, or rather, it wasn't visible anymore. The wall appeared seamless, with no indication that a door had ever been there. "I'm not crazy," Sarah said to me, her eyes fixed on mine. "I know what I saw." When hotel security reviewed the footage from that evening, it showed Sarah walking down the hallway, stopping near the end, and then apparently opening what looked like a section of wall. The camera angle didn't capture what was inside, but it clearly showed her entering a space that, according to the hotel's floor plans, didn't exist. 7 minutes later, the footage showed her running back down the hallway to the elevators. The hotel's maintenance staff was called to examine the wall. They found nothing, no hidden door, no concealed entrance, not even a seam in the wallpaper. According to every blueprint and renovation record, that section of the building was solid wall, backing up against the fire stairwell. The investigation took an even stranger turn when we checked Sarah's room key card logs. According to the electronic system, her key had been used to enter room 712 at 3 distinct times during the night before. Once when she initially checked in, once at 2:33 a.m. when she woke up for water, and once at 3:17 a.m., a time when Sarah insists she was sound asleep. The hotel management, concerned about potential liability and reputation damage, cooperated fully with our investigation. They provided access to all areas of the 7th floor, including adjacent rooms and maintenance spaces. Engineers examined the building's structure, looking for any hidden spaces or passages. Nothing unusual was found. But the photograph Sarah described was never recovered. By the time she returned to the 7th floor with the night manager, the room and everything in it had vanished, if it had ever existed at all. 3 days after filing her report, Sarah checked out of the Elmwood Grand and never returned. The hotel offered her compensation for the distress caused, which she accepted, signing a non-disclosure agreement in the process. The case might have ended there, filed away as an unexplained incident, perhaps the result of stress or an elaborate prank. But 2 months later, another guest reported something similar. A business traveler named Michael Chen, staying in room 712, the same room Sarah had occupied, woke in the middle of the night to find his laptop open and running, despite having shut it down before bed. On the screen was a single image, a photograph of himself, sleeping, taken from an angle that suggested someone standing at the foot of his bed. The hotel closed room 712 after that. They cited renovations as the official reason, but the door remains locked to this day. Occasionally, guests on the 7th floor report unusual sounds during the night, the soft click of a door opening and closing, footsteps that seem to pass through solid walls, the barely perceptible sound of a camera shutter. I've returned to the Elmwood Grand many times since then, walking that 7th floor hallway, studying the seamless wall where Sarah insisted she found a door. Sometimes, in the right light, I think I can see the faintest outline of a door frame. Other times, I'm certain it's just my imagination, wanting to find a rational explanation for something that defies reason. The case remains open but inactive. No charges filed, no suspects identified. Just a folder in my filing cabinet containing statements, security footage stills, and hotel floor plans, evidence of a room that, according to every official record, never existed. Sometimes I wonder about that photograph Sarah described, the one showing her asleep in a bed she had never consciously occupied. I wonder who took it and how. But mostly I wonder if somewhere in that grand old hotel, behind a door that appears only when it wishes to be found, that picture still sits in its silver frame, gathering dust alongside newer images of unsuspecting guests, sleeping peacefully, unaware they're being watched. And sometimes, late at night in my own home, I find myself staring at the wall opposite my bed, watching for the faintest outline of a door that has no reason to be there, wondering what might be on the other side, looking back at me. Story 3. I remember the file landing on my desk with a soft thud, the manila folder worn at the edges, as if it had been handled many times before reaching me. The precinct was quiet that morning, just the distant hum of fluorescent lights and the occasional murmur of voices from behind closed doors. Rain tapped gently against the windows, creating a rhythm that seemed to match my heartbeat as I opened the folder. Jessica Monroe, 32 years old. Her photograph showed a woman with dark hair and eyes that seemed to be looking through the camera rather than at it. Her case had started 3 weeks ago in Evergreen Park, where the maple trees were beginning to turn amber in the early October chill. The statement was written in neat, almost too careful handwriting. I ran my finger along the edge of the paper as I read, feeling its slight texture against my skin. The words seemed to float off the page, forming shadows on my desk as the rain continued its soft percussion outside. "He approached me while I was sitting on the bench near the pond," her statement began. "At first, I thought he was just another jogger taking a break, but then he said my name. Not just my name, he said it the way my father used to say it, with that slight pause between the syllables." I took a sip from my coffee, now lukewarm in the white ceramic mug that had been with me through hundreds of cases. The bitterness lingered on my tongue as I continued reading. The stranger had sat down beside her, keeping a respectful distance. He appeared to be in his mid-40s, well-dressed in a gray coat that seemed slightly too warm for the weather. Nothing remarkable about his appearance, brown hair graying at the temples, average height, clean-shaven. The kind of face that blends into a crowd forgotten moments after seeing it. But what he said next had made Jessica's blood run cold. "You still sleep with that old patchwork blanket your grandmother made, don't you? The one with the blue squares that's fraying at the bottom right corner." I set down my mug slowly, the soft clink against the wooden desk seeming unnaturally loud in the quiet room. How could he have known about that blanket? It wasn't the kind of detail you could find online or through casual observation. It was the kind of intimate knowledge that comes only from being inside someone's home, inside their private space. Jessica had asked him exactly that. According to her statement, her voice had trembled slightly, but she'd held her ground, demanding to know who he was and how he knew these things. "You told me yourself," he had replied, his voice soft and matter-of-fact. "Every night." I leaned back in my chair, feeling the leather creak beneath me. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, marking time in measured beats. Outside, the rain had intensified slightly, blurring the view of the city beyond my window. Jessica had reported that she lived alone in a small apartment in Westbrook Heights. No roommates, no recent break-ins, no signs of surveillance equipment when we checked. She had no stalking complaints on file, no restraining orders against former partners. Her digital footprint was minimal. She wasn't the type to share personal details online. And yet this stranger knew things that made no sense for him to know. He had continued their conversation in the park, recounting a memory of her falling from a tree house when she was 8 years old, breaking her arm in 2 places. He described the yellow cast she had worn for 6 weeks during the summer, and how her best friend Melanie had drawn tiny sunflowers all over it. When Jessica had stood up to leave, alarmed and intending to call for help, he had simply nodded as if expecting this reaction. "Check your bedroom window tonight," he had told her. "The left one where the latch is loose. I'll be listening." I turned to the next page in the file. Our officers had indeed found that the left window in Jessica's bedroom had a faulty latch, something she claimed she hadn't noticed before. There were no fingerprints other than hers, no sign of entry. The 3-story drop from her window to the ground made it virtually impossible for someone to climb up without equipment, and there were no marks or traces to suggest anyone had tried. We had installed surveillance cameras facing her window from both inside and outside. For 2 weeks, nothing happened. No visitors, no break-ins, just Jessica, alone in her apartment, growing more anxious each day. On the 5th page of the report was a transcript of a conversation we had recorded 3 days after the initial report. Jessica had been on the phone with her mother, confirming details about her childhood. "Mom, did I ever have a blanket from Grandma, one with blue patches?" The response had come after a pause. "No, honey. Your grandmother died before you were born. She never made you anything." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning in the precinct. If her grandmother had never made her a blanket, how did the stranger know about it? And more importantly, why did Jessica believe it was true until she confirmed otherwise? I turned to the psychological evaluation that had been added to the file yesterday. Dr. Maynard had noted that Jessica showed no signs of mental illness or paranoia, but she did exhibit markers of someone under extreme stress. She had begun to question her own memories, unsure of what was real and what wasn't. The rain had stopped now, leaving a silence that felt heavy in the room. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the glistening streets below. Somewhere out there was a man who knew things he shouldn't know, or perhaps a woman who believed things that had never happened. On my desk, the phone began to ring, its shrill tone cutting through my thoughts. I turned from the window and picked it up, pressing it against my ear. "Detective Mercer," I answered. The voice on the other end was familiar Officer Chen from the surveillance team. "We've got something," she said, her words measured and careful. "The cameras in Jessica's apartment picked up audio last night, around 2:17 a.m. I returned to my desk, pulling a notepad closer. "What kind of audio?" "A conversation," Chen replied. "But here's the thing, Jessica was alone in the apartment, asleep. The camera shows her in bed, not moving, not speaking, but we clearly picked up two voices." I felt the pen grow still in my hand. Two voices. Yes, a male voice, very soft, asking questions, and then what sounds like Jessica answering, but her lips weren't moving. The audio techs are analyzing it now, but they're saying the female voice is coming from Jessica, even though she's clearly asleep. I thanked Chen and hung up, staring at the photograph of Jessica Monroe again. Those eyes that seemed to be looking somewhere else, somewhere beyond the camera. I opened my drawer and pulled out a small digital recorder, setting it on top of the file. Tonight, I would go to Jessica's apartment myself. I would listen for the voice of a stranger who knew too much, and for answers that came from somewhere beyond consciousness. As I closed the file, a note slipped out, a small piece of paper I hadn't noticed before. On it, in handwriting that matched Jessica's statement, were three simple words that made my skin prickle with unease. "He's listening now." I looked around my empty office, suddenly aware of the silence, how complete it was, how watchful it felt. And for the first time in 15 years as a detective, I wondered if some mysteries weren't meant to be solved, if some voices weren't meant to be heard. But I would listen anyway. Tonight, I would listen for the stranger who knew her past, and perhaps discover why Jessica was telling him things every night, things even she didn't know were true. Story 4. I remember the first time I set foot in the Blackwood estate. The air held that peculiar stillness you find in places that have been emptied too long, a thickness that settles into your lungs with each breath. It was late October, the kind of autumn afternoon where shadows stretch like curious fingers across weathered floorboards. The real estate agent's keys jangled nervously as she struggled with the lock, a sound that seemed impossibly loud against the quiet of the overgrown property. "The previous owners left rather suddenly," she said, her voice dropping to match the hushed atmosphere. "Been vacant nearly 20 years now." What she didn't mention, what I would discover in the weeks that followed, was that the house had never truly been empty. My name is Daniel Harmon. I investigate cold cases, the kind that gather dust in county archives and haunt small-town memories. The Blackwood case wasn't officially mine. I was simply there because Martin and Julia Reed, the young couple who had purchased the property, had reached out to me after finding something unsettling. something that made them question whether they were alone in their new home. The front door opened with a reluctant groan. Afternoon light spilled across the entryway, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air like miniature constellations. The house was a Victorian masterpiece, ornate crown molding, mahogany banisters worn smooth by generations of hands, stained glass windows that painted the floor in jewel-toned patterns. Everything you'd expect from a historic property that had stood for over a century. But there was something else, something I couldn't quite name. It started with small things, Julia explained as she led me through rooms that smelled of fresh paint mixed with that unmistakable scent of aged wood. Her voice was measured, but I could detect the underlying tension. A coffee mug we'd misplaced years ago, sitting on the kitchen counter the morning after we moved in. Martin's old watch, the one he lost during our honeymoon in Maine, found in the nightstand drawer. Martin nodded, his fingers absently tracing patterns on the dining room table. We thought we were forgetting, the stress of moving, unpacking boxes from storage we hadn't opened in years. It made sense that we'd rediscover old belongings. Until we found the photographs, Julia continued. She slid a manila envelope across the table. Inside were dozens of pictures, ordinary moments captured through windows, across parking lots in restaurants. The Reeds walking their dog, Julia collecting mail, Martin washing his car. Mundane scenes from their lives over the past 5 years, all taken from a distance, from angles that suggested the photographer hadn't wanted to be noticed. None of these were taken by us, Martin said quietly, and they were all here when we arrived, tucked inside a box in the attic labeled with our names. I studied each photograph carefully, noting dates scribbled on the backs. The earliest was from 6 years ago, long before the Reeds had ever heard of Blackwood Estate. "There's more," Julia whispered, and I could feel the weight of what was coming next. The leather-bound journal she placed before me looked ordinary enough, the kind you might pick up at any bookstore. But its contents made my skin prickle with that particular sensation that comes when something fundamentally wrong reveals itself. Page after page detailed the Reeds' lives with unsettling precision. Their morning routines, arguments they'd had behind closed doors, dreams Julia had shared only with Martin, medical concerns, financial worries, and then, most disturbing of all, entries that hadn't happened yet, plans they'd only just made, conversations they'd had after moving into the house. "We thought it might be an elaborate prank," Martin explained, his voice hollow. "But no one knew we were buying this house until we made an offer. We told no one during the inspection period. We were afraid of jinxing it." I nodded, turning pages slowly, methodically, my mind working through possibilities. "Has anything gone missing since you moved in? Electronics, personal items?" They exchanged glances. "No," Julia said, "the opposite actually. Things we've lost over the years keep appearing. My grandmother's brooch that was stolen during a home break-in 3 years ago. Martin's college thesis notes, even Baxter's old collar." She gestured to their golden retriever sleeping in the corner. I spent that night in the guest room, surrounded by the gentle creaking that old houses make as they settle. Sleep came reluctantly, and when it did, it was light and uneasy. I woke frequently, each time with the distinct feeling of being observed. The digital clock on the nightstand cast a soft red glow, the only illumination in the perfect darkness. 3:17 a.m. I heard a drawer sliding open somewhere in the house. The floorboards were cool against my feet as I moved silently down the hallway. Years of investigative work had taught me to move quietly, to blend with shadows. The sound had come from the study, a room the Reeds had yet to fully furnish, containing only an antique desk and empty bookshelves. The drawer was still open when I entered, moonlight catching on something metallic inside. My flashlight revealed a small key, tarnished with age but gleaming as though recently polished. Beneath it lay a folded piece of paper with my name written in elegant, flowing script. "I've been expecting you, Daniel." My pulse quickened, but I maintained the calm detachment that had served me through countless investigations. Someone wanted me to find this key. Someone who knew I would hear the drawer, who knew I would investigate. The key fit a lock in the basement, a door the Reeds had assumed was an old coal chute, permanently sealed. Beyond it lay a small room that had been carefully, meticulously erased from the house plans. The space was clinically clean compared to the rest of the cellar, its walls lined with filing cabinets, each drawer labeled with a name. I found the drawer marked Harmon easily. It contained a single folder with details of my life photographs spanning decades, notes on cases I'd worked, observations about my habits, and most disturbingly, a detailed account of what I would find in this very room at this very moment. The Reeds had their own drawers, as did the previous owners, the Blackwoods, but the oldest files, the ones with yellowed pages and faded ink, bore the name of the original builder, Elias Warner. The local historical society provided the missing pieces the following day. Elias Warner, an eccentric inventor who had made his fortune in timepieces, had built the house in 1897. He had disappeared under mysterious circumstances in 1903, leaving behind rumors of experiments with the perception of time and memory. His body was never found. Through county records and old newspapers, I pieced together a pattern. Every family who had lived in the Warner house later renamed Blackwood after its longest residents had experienced the same phenomena. Lost items reappearing, photographs they hadn't taken, journals documenting their lives with impossible accuracy. And each family had left suddenly, often in the middle of the night, leaving belongings behind. The house doesn't just remember, Mrs. Patterson, the 93-year-old former town librarian, told me when I visited. Her eyes clouded with cataracts, but sharp with memory. It knows, it watches. My parents rented a room there in the 40s, left after 2 weeks, never spoke of why, but Mother burned every photograph we owned afterward. The technical explanation came from Dr. Alina Simmons, a physicist who had studied the geological anomalies of the area in the 1970s. The house sits at the convergence of unusual electromagnetic fields, she explained over the phone, her academic tone belying the strangeness of her theory. Warner might have unwittingly built his home on a spot where time doesn't behave quite linearly, or perhaps he knew exactly what he was doing. The final piece came from Warner's own journals, preserved in the university archives. His last entry dated the day before his disappearance. The mechanism is complete. The house now exists simultaneously in all moments of its existence, past, present, and future, overlapping like pages in a book. I have created a living memory, a consciousness bound in wood and stone rather than flesh. Tomorrow I will join with it completely. I presented my findings to the Reeds 3 days after my arrival. They listened in silence, the weight of understanding settling over them like a physical thing. "So the house remembers people who live here?" Julia finally asked. "But how could it have memories of us before we moved in?" I looked down at the journal that had documented their lives, at the neat handwriting that matched samples of Warner's from over a century ago. I believe Warner succeeded in creating something that experiences time differently than we do, I said carefully. To the house, or whatever consciousness inhabits it, our arrival was always a certainty. It's been waiting for you, collecting you, long before you ever knew this place existed. The Reeds sold the property the following week. The new owners, a family from Chicago, moved in a month later. I drive by occasionally, watching warm light spill from windows that have witnessed over 100 years of lives unfolding. I wonder how long before they too find items they've lost, photographs taken by unseen hands, journals documenting moments not yet lived. And sometimes when I pass, I could swear the house watches back patient, inevitable, remembering not just what was, but what will be. Because some structures hold more than just the spaces between their walls. Some hold time itself, folded like origami into forms we can barely comprehend. The Blackwood Estate Warner's house remembers everything, including what hasn't happened yet. Story 5. The afternoon light filtered through the dusty blinds of my office, casting long shadows across the scattered case files on my desk. I've been a detective for 23 years, but some cases stay with you, haunting your thoughts during quiet moments. The Alina Winters case is one of those. I can still feel the weight of her file in my hands, the slight resistance as I turn each page, revealing photographs and notes that tell a story most people would rather not hear. I remember the first time I stepped into Alina's apartment. It was a Tuesday in late October. The air inside was stale, heavy with the scent of oil paint and turpentine. Nothing seemed disturbed, no signs of forced entry, no obvious struggle. Just an ordinary apartment belonging to a 34-year-old art conservator who hadn't shown up to work for 3 days. Then I saw it, the portrait. It hung on the far wall of her living room, positioned so it faced the couch where I imagine Alina spent her evenings. An antique painting, roughly 4 feet tall, with a heavy gilded frame that seemed too ornate for the otherwise modest apartment. The subject was a man, mid-40s perhaps, wearing Victorian-era clothing, with piercing eyes that seemed to follow me as I moved through the room. "That's odd," my partner, Detective Morales, said as she flipped through a small leather-bound diary found on Alina's nightstand. She mentions this painting repeatedly. Listen to this entry from 2 weeks ago. I've started to notice something strange about the portrait. When I wake up in the morning, the eyes seem to be looking in a different direction than they were when I went to sleep. I approached the painting, noting the fine brushwork, the attention to detail in the subject's face. The name Thomas Blackwood was inscribed on a small brass plate at the bottom of the frame. "Any relation to the Blackwood Gallery?" Morales asked, referring to the prestigious art gallery downtown where Alina occasionally did restoration work. "Worth looking into," I replied, my voice sounding unusually hushed in the quiet apartment. We spent hours cataloging Alina's belongings, searching for any clue about where she might have gone. Her purse was still there, keys and wallet inside. Her phone was on the charger beside her bed. A half-empty cup of tea sat on the coffee table, a thin film of mold forming on its surface. The diary provided our first real lead. Alina had documented her growing obsession with the portrait over the weeks preceding her disappearance. Early entries described her excitement at being asked to restore the painting by Jonathan Blackwood, the current owner of the Blackwood Gallery and a direct descendant of the man in the portrait. "I can't believe I'll be working on an original Hargrove," she wrote. "Jonathan says it's been in his family for generations, but they've kept it in storage because the eyes give people the creeps." I think that's ridiculous. It's just a brilliant use of perspective by the artist. But as the weeks progressed, her entries became increasingly disturbed. She described feeling watched in her apartment, hearing footsteps at night, finding objects moved from where she'd left them. I know how this sounds, read an entry from 3 days before she vanished, but the portrait is changing. Not just the eyes now, the expression too. It's subtle, but the mouth seems different, more knowing. I've taken photographs to compare, but when I look at them side by side, they appear identical. Am I losing my mind? The final entry simply read, "It's not just watching anymore. I think it wants something from me." The next day, we visited the Blackwood Gallery. Jonathan Blackwood was a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses and a perpetual frown. He seemed genuinely concerned about Aline's disappearance, explaining that she had been restoring the family portrait for an upcoming exhibition. "It's strange," he said, fidgeting with a gold signet ring on his left hand. She seemed fascinated by the painting from the moment she saw it, almost entranced. I never should have let her take it home. "Why did you?" I asked, noting how he avoided making direct eye contact. "She insisted she could do better work in her own space, said the lighting in our restoration room wasn't adequate." He paused, his frown deepening. "The portrait has always had an effect on people. My grandfather used to say it captured more than just Thomas Blackwood's likeness." As we left the gallery, Morales nudged me. "Did you notice his ring? Same crest that was on the back of the portrait's frame." We spent the next week digging into the Blackwood family history. Thomas Blackwood, the man in the portrait, had made his fortune in the late 1800s importing art from Europe. He had a reputation for acquiring pieces through questionable means, often from collectors who mysteriously changed their minds about selling, or who suffered sudden financial ruin that forced them to part with family heirlooms. More disturbing were the stories about artists who worked for him. 5 different painters who had been commissioned by Blackwood disappeared under unusual circumstances. Each had been working on restorations of valuable pieces shortly before they vanished. "There's something here," I told Morales as we sat in my car outside the gallery one evening, watching Jonathan Blackwood lock up for the night. "But I can't connect the dots." That night I dreamed of Aline's apartment. In the dream I stood before the portrait, but instead of Thomas Blackwood, I saw Aline's face looking back at me from within the gilded frame, her eyes wide with terror, her mouth open in a silent scream. I woke with a start, my heart racing. Something about the portrait was nagging at me. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through the photographs we'd taken at Aline's apartment. The portrait of Thomas Blackwood stared back at me from my screen, his eyes seeming to follow my movements even in digital form. Wait, there was something about the eyes. I called Morales at 5:30 in the morning. "We need to take another look at that painting," I said without preamble. 2 hours later, we were back in Aline's apartment. The portrait hung exactly where we'd left it, but now, looking at it with fresh eyes and the benefit of our research, I noticed details I'd missed before. "Look at the technique," I said, pointing to the intricate brushwork around the subject's eyes. According to the records, this portrait was painted by William Hargrove in 1887, but this technique, the way the light reflects in the iris, this wasn't common until the early 1900s. Morales frowned. "You think it's a forgery?" "No," I said slowly. "I think it's been modified repeatedly." We carefully removed the portrait from the wall. It was heavier than it looked, and as we laid it face down on Aline's dining table, I noticed small marks on the wooden backing, initials and dates barely visible in the dim light. WH 1887, AC 1903, RT 1924, MD 1956, SG 1978, EW 2023. Alina Winters, AW. All the missing artists, Morales whispered. They all worked on this painting. With gloved hands, I carefully examined the portrait's frame, running my fingers along the ornate carvings. Near the bottom, I felt a small mechanism. When pressed, it released a hidden compartment in the frame. Inside was a slim leather journal, much older than Alina's diary. The pages were yellowed with age, filled with cramped handwriting and faded ink. It was Thomas Blackwood's journal. The entries detailed Blackwood's obsession with immortality and his discovery of an artist in Eastern Europe who claimed to have found a way to transfer a soul into a painting. The final entry, dated 2 days before Thomas Blackwood's reported death in 1890, read, "Tonight I become eternal. The formula is prepared. The artist understands his role, willingly or not. Soon I will watch over my legacy forever, guiding it through generations yet unborn." "My God," Morales said, "he put himself into the painting somehow. And every time the paint begins to fade, I started. He needs a new artist to restore it," she finished, "to add their essence to the portrait. We brought in art conservation experts who confirmed our suspicions. Using specialized equipment, they discovered layers of paint built up over decades, each layer containing unusual organic compounds that couldn't be identified. More disturbing was what they found beneath the surface image. Using infrared scanning, they revealed not one face in the portrait, but many, layered one atop another, their features blending together in a macabre palimpsest of stolen identities. And the newest layer, still wet in places beneath the surface, showed the unmistakable beginnings of Alina's features merging with Thomas Blackwood's. Jonathan Blackwood was arrested the following day. Under questioning, he eventually admitted to knowing about his ancestors' technique for achieving immortality. As the current guardian of the portrait, he was responsible for finding new artists when the painting began to fade, a process that happened every 20 to 30 years. "You don't understand," he said, his voice eerily calm in the interrogation room. "He speaks to us, guides us. The family prosperity depends on keeping him satisfied." "Where is Alina Winters?" I asked for what felt like the 100th time. He smiled then, a chilling expression that reminded me too much of the portrait. "She's where they all go. She's part of something greater now." We never found Alina's body. The portrait was secured as evidence, locked away in a climate-controlled storage facility at police headquarters. Sometimes, late at night when the building is quiet, I find myself wanting to go down there to look into those eyes one more time, but I resist the urge. Because sometimes when I close my eyes, I can still see Alina's face emerging from beneath Thomas Blackwood's steady gaze. And I swear, in certain moments between wakefulness and sleep, I can hear her voice whispering, "He's still watching. He's always watching." And sometimes I wonder if he's watching me now. Story 6. I remember the first time I saw the Henderson property. It was a crisp October morning, the kind where your breath hangs in the air just long enough to remind you that winter is coming. The old Victorian stood silhouetted against a canvas of amber and rust-colored leaves, its weathered facade telling stories that words never could. As a detective with 20 years under my belt, I developed what some might call a sixth sense about places. This house, it was holding something. The young couple, the Millers, had purchased it at auction 3 months prior. A steal, they'd said. The previous owners had disappeared without explanation, leaving behind furniture, clothing, even family photos. The bank had finally foreclosed after 6 months of silence. Now, the Millers were knee-deep in renovations when they found the first journal, tucked behind a section of deteriorating drywall in what was once a child's bedroom. "We didn't think much of it at first," Sarah Miller explained, her fingers tracing the worn leather binding as we sat at their temporary kitchen table. The renovation dust coated everything with a fine powder that caught the slanting afternoon light. Just an old diary, but then we found another, and another. Her husband Jake pushed 3 journals across the table toward me. "The thing is, Detective Harmon, we looked up the names. These people, they never lived here. At least, not according to any record we could find." I lifted the first journal, belonging to a Margaret Winters, dated 1967. The handwriting was neat, measured, a school teacher perhaps. I thumbed through pages describing an ordinary life. Garden club meetings, Sunday dinners, a troublesome leak in the basement that her husband couldn't seem to fix. But the final entry sent a chill through me that had nothing to do with the draft seeping through the old windows. "I hear it again tonight, the scratching in the walls. Henry says it's just mice, but mice don't whisper your name. I should have listened to the warnings. I should have left while I could. To whoever finds this, leave before it's too late." The second journal belonged to a Thomas Blackwood, a banker who supposedly lived in the house during the 1980s. Different handwriting, different life, same ominous final warning. The third, more recent 2003, a teenage girl named Lily Chen. 3 entirely different people spanning 4 decades, none of whom appeared in property records, all ending their accounts with identical warnings. "Have you heard anything?" I asked, keeping my tone measured, professional. "Any noises that seem unusual?" The Millers exchanged a look that told me everything I needed to know before they even spoke. "Just the house settling," Jake offered, but his eyes darted toward the ceiling where, even now, a faint creak sounded as though someone was walking across the floor above us. We were on the top floor. I've investigated hundreds of cases in my career. Most have logical explanations. Most. The following morning, I visited the county records office. Marjorie, who'd been the clerk there since before I was born, greeted me with a knowing smile. "Henderson Place?" she asked, already pulling a thick file. "News travels fast in small towns." "What can you tell me about the previous owners?" I asked, accepting the coffee she offered. "Which ones?" She raised an eyebrow. "That house has changed hands more times than any other property in the county. Never seems to keep owners for more than a few years." The file told a story more disturbing than any journal. Since its construction in 1898, the Henderson house had seen 23 different owners. None had stayed longer than 4 years. 7 had disappeared without a trace, including the most recent owners before the Millers. 4 had died under what the records delicately called unusual circumstances. The rest had simply left, often in the middle of the night, according to neighbors, leaving most possessions behind. I spent the next week interviewing former neighbors, postal workers, anyone who might have observed the comings and goings at the Henderson place over the years. The stories shared common threads, new owners filled with enthusiasm, renovations that always seemed to uncover something unexpected, growing isolation, and then absence. They were fine until they started tearing down that wall between the kitchen and dining room, said Alina Simmons, who lived across the street for 40 years. After that, they changed, stopped coming outside, kept the curtains drawn. Then one day, the house was just empty. On day 9 of my investigation, Sarah Miller called. Her voice trembled on the phone. "We found another journal in the basement behind the furnace." When I arrived, the journal sat open on the kitchen table. The entries were dated 1898, the year the house was built. The handwriting was elegant, formal, belonging to the original architect, Harold Henderson. The entries detailed the construction, including Henderson's pride in certain innovative features he'd incorporated into the design, features that made the house special. But as I turned the pages, the entries grew darker. Henderson wrote of arguments with his construction crew who claimed to hear voices in the walls. He wrote of his growing obsession with creating a house that was alive. The final entry, dated 3 days before Henderson's mysterious death by falling from the attic window, contained a diagram, an intricate pattern of chambers within the house's walls, like veins or neural pathways connecting every room. The last line read simply, "It listens, it learns, it grows." That night I returned to my office and pulled every historical record I could find on Harold Henderson. Before building the house that bore his name, he had studied architecture in Europe, specifically focusing on ancient designs rumored to trap spirits. He'd also been deeply involved in the occult movement of the late 1800s, believing that structures could be imbued with consciousness through specific geometrical patterns and rituals. The following day, I brought in ground-penetrating radar equipment. The technician's face grew increasingly confused as the scan progressed. "This doesn't make sense," he muttered. "According to these readings, there are chambers within the walls that aren't in any blueprint, and they're expanding." That was 3 weeks ago. The Millers moved out yesterday, after Sarah claimed she heard her name being whispered from inside the heating vent. They didn't take anything with them, said they wanted no reminders. As for the journals, we've now found 17 in total. 17 different lives, 17 different time periods, 17 identical warnings. Our handwriting analyst confirms they were all written by different people. The house stands empty again. From across the street, I sometimes sit in my car and watch it. On certain nights, when the moon is just right, I swear I can see the faintest shift in the structure, as though the house is breathing. The case remains open. The property will likely go to auction again. Someone new will come, attracted by the low price, the historic charm. They'll start renovating. They'll find a journal. And the house that grows secrets will claim another story. I should close this investigation, file it away, move on to cases I can actually solve. But first, I need to write down what I've learned, just in case. Because lately, I've been having the strangest feeling that someone or something is watching me from empty windows of the Henderson place. And last night, I dreamed of hidden chambers and whispers coming from behind my bedroom wall. To whoever finds this, leave before it's too late. Story 7, I remember the first time I saw the package. It was a Wednesday afternoon in late October when the air carries that particular blend of decay and renewal. The kind of day when leaves crunch underfoot and the sky seems impossibly vast yet somehow close enough to touch. The small brown parcel sat innocuously on Sarah Emerson's porch, addressed in neat, almost mechanical handwriting with no return address. Just another delivery in a world where packages arrive daily on doorsteps across America. But this was different. This was the beginning. I've been an investigator with the Bellingham County Sheriff's Department for 17 years. You develop a sense for things after that long, a quiet instinct that whispers when something isn't quite right. When Sarah called us 3 days after receiving that package, I felt that whisper before I even arrived at her modest 2-story home on Maple Street. It started with just a few words, she told me, her fingers trembling slightly as she pushed the notebook across her kitchen table. The late afternoon sun filtered through gauzy curtains, casting soft shadows that danced across the page. I opened it when it arrived, and it was blank, every page. I thought maybe it was a mistake or a gift from my sister. She's into journaling. The notebook was unremarkable. Black cover, college-ruled pages, the kind you'd find in any office supply store. Nothing unusual except for what was written on the first 5 pages. Neat, precise handwriting that didn't match Sarah's looping script. But then yesterday morning I found this, she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't write it. I live alone. No one has been in my house. I studied the first page. It described in meticulous detail Sarah's morning routine from the previous day. What time she woke up, the blue mug she used for coffee, the brief phone call with her mother, even the small stain of toothpaste she'd accidentally gotten on her blouse. And this morning there was more. She carefully turned to the second page. Everything I did yesterday, down to the television show I watched before bed. There was something deeply unsettling about the precision of the observations. Not just what she had done, but how. The way she'd hesitated before answering a work email. How she'd stood at the window for exactly 12 minutes watching the rain. Details that only someone who had been watching very closely would know. The last entry ended with those 7 words, "You're not safe, I am watching you." I took the notebook into evidence that day, treating her home as a potential crime scene, though there were no signs of forced entry. No fingerprints besides Sarah's on the notebook or packaging. No unusual footprints in the soft earth of the garden beds beneath her windows. Nothing on her home security cameras, which showed only the delivery person dropping off the package and walking away. "Maybe it's someone at work," suggested my partner, Detective Lori Chen, as we reviewed the case in our office the next morning. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of the heating system and the occasional squeak of her chair as she leaned back. A stalker situation. I nodded slowly, turning the theory over in my mind. Sarah works remotely 3 days a week, but goes into the office on Tuesdays and Thursdays. We should start there. Sarah's colleagues at the marketing firm where she worked as a graphic designer all expressed surprise when we subtly questioned them. None seemed to have any unusual interest in her, and her supervisor confirmed she hadn't received any concerning attention from clients either. We installed additional security measures at Sarah's home, motion-activated cameras, new locks, a direct alert system to the department. But the next morning she called again, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. "There's more writing. It shouldn't be possible." I drove to her home immediately, the morning fog still clinging to the valleys between houses. The notebook, which we had taken into evidence, was still locked in our department's secure room, but Sarah held another one in her shaking hands, identical to the first. "It appeared on my kitchen counter sometime in the night," she said, not looking up from its pages. "The cameras didn't catch anything. The doors were locked. The alarm was set." This notebook contained more of the same precise descriptions of her movements, her phone calls, even what she'd written in a private email to her sister. And something new, details about our investigation, the questions we'd asked her colleagues, the security measures we'd implemented. "Whoever is doing this knows about us," I said quietly to Lori later that day. The realization settled heavily in the room, like the weight of approaching storm clouds. They're either watching us too, or they're one of us, she finished, her expression grim. We kept the second notebook quiet, telling no one else in the department. Instead, we set a trap. Sarah would stay with her sister in another town. We would maintain the appearance that she was still at home, with an officer resembling her briefly appearing at windows and doors at scheduled times. 3 days passed. The tension in the department was palpable, a thin wire stretched to its breaking point. On the fourth morning, a third notebook appeared, not at Sarah's empty house, but on my own desk inside my locked office. My hands were not quite steady as I opened it. The first pages contained the same meticulous observations of Sarah's routines, only now they described her movements at her sister's house, in a town 30 miles away, details no one should have known. The final page addressed me directly. "Detective, you're looking in the wrong direction. The answer is in the machines." It was Officer Kendrick who eventually made the connection. A young, tech-savvy recent addition to our department, he'd been reviewing Sarah's electronics. "Her computer has been compromised," he explained, pointing to lines of code I couldn't begin to understand. "Not just her computer, her entire smart home system. Someone has access to everything, her security cameras, her smart speaker, her digital assistant." "But the notebooks," I began, physical objects appearing inside locked rooms. Kendrick's explanation revealed an elegant, terrifying simplicity. Sarah had a hobby letterpress in her garage, rarely used. Her security system controlled the garage door. Her online shopping account had automatic ordering enabled. Someone had remotely ordered identical notebooks, used her own equipment to print the pages while she slept, and placed them where she would find them. The culprit was Martin Grayson, a former IT specialist at Sarah's company who had been fired 6 months earlier after Sarah reported inappropriate comments he had made. He had installed backdoor access to company systems before leaving, and had been patiently planning his psychological revenge ever since. When we arrested him, he seemed almost disappointed that we had figured it out. In his apartment, we found dozens of notebooks filled with observations about Sarah and other former colleagues. A digital surveillance operation that had evolved into something more personally invasive. The case was closed, but the feeling of unease never quite dissolved. I still think about it on quiet nights when my own computer makes an unexpected sound, or when my phone lights up for no apparent reason. Because in a world where our homes, our devices, our very lives are increasingly connected, the boundaries we believe keep us safe may be nothing more than an illusion. Sarah moved away eventually, changed her name, disconnected from all social media and smart technology. Sometimes I wonder if she still checks blank notebooks in the morning, half expecting to find new words that shouldn't be there. And sometimes, when I wake in the darkest part of night, I wonder who else might be watching, invisible observers documenting our lives through the digital windows we ourselves have installed. The notebooks sit in our evidence room, a reminder that the most effective intrusions aren't always the ones that break down doors. Sometimes they simply slip through the cracks we didn't even know existed. Story 8. I remember the night the case file first crossed my desk. Rain tapped gently against the window of my office, creating a rhythm that matched the slow, methodical ticking of the wall clock behind me. The manila folder was thin, unusual for a case with such peculiar circumstances. The overhead light cast a soft yellow glow that made the paper inside seem aged, though the report was only 3 days old. My fingers traced the edge of the first photograph, a Victorian house on Maple Street, pale blue with white trim, its windows like dark, watchful eyes. Something about that house felt wrong even before I knew the details. The porch light created a small pool of warmth against the gathering darkness, but it couldn't penetrate the shadows that seemed to collect in the corners of the property. "Detective Rivers," my sergeant had said earlier that evening, his voice low and measured. "This one's different. Take your time with it." Different was an understatement. The woman who lived in the house was Alina Winters, 42, a local librarian known for her meticulous nature and quiet demeanor. She had no history of mental illness, no criminal record, not even a parking ticket. Her statement, handwritten in precise, flowing script, sat before me now. I began to read, allowing the words to wash over me as the rain continued its gentle percussion against the glass. It was shortly after 8 p.m. when he knocked on my door. The storm had just begun to intensify, and I remember thinking it was odd to have a visitor so late, especially in such weather. I paused, taking a sip of my cooling coffee. The forensic report confirmed that on the night in question, there had indeed been significant rainfall, nearly 2 inches. The ground around the property would have been soft, receptive to footprints, and yet... He was tall, perhaps 6 feet, with dark hair graying at the temples. His clothes were soaked through, clinging to his frame. He wore a charcoal gray suit that seemed outdated somehow, like something from another time. When he spoke, his voice was gentle, almost melodic. He said his car had broken down half a mile back and asked if he might use my phone. I turned the page, the soft rustle filling the quiet room. The statement continued to detail how Alina had invited the stranger in, offered him tea, which he accepted with gloved hands he never removed. They spoke for nearly an hour about books. Alina noted his particular interest in restoration techniques for damaged manuscripts. He seemed knowledgeable, comfortable, not at all like someone who had found himself stranded by circumstance. He thanked me for my hospitality around 9:30 p.m., insisted he'd call for assistance from the gas station down the road. I watched from the window as he walked away into the rain. That's when I noticed something strange. He left no footprints in the muddy path leading from my porch. The ground was completely undisturbed, as if he had never been there at all. My finger paused on this line, pressing lightly into the paper. The crime scene photos confirmed her observation. The pathway leading to and from the house showed only Alina's own footprints from earlier that day. No other impressions marked the soft earth. The folder contained detailed images of the house interior as well. The teacup the visitor had used showed no fingerprints, despite Alina's insistence that he had handled it. The chair where he sat retained no indentation, no fallen hairs, no fibers, nothing to suggest anyone had occupied it just hours before. I reached for the final piece of evidence, a photocopy of a letter carefully preserved in a plastic sleeve. According to Alina, she had found it in her mailbox the morning after the visitor left. The paper was yellowed with age, the ink faded to a sepia tone. It was addressed to the current resident of 47 Maple Street and signed Thomas Blackwood. The date at the top read April 17, 1886, nearly 140 years ago. The letter itself was simple. To whom it may concern. I write this in hopes that someday someone might understand what transpired here. The work I've done in this house must be protected. I have ensured its safekeeping in ways that transcend ordinary methods. Should you find evidence of my research, I implore you, do not disturb what lies beneath the library floorboards. Some knowledge is better left undiscovered. With sincere regard, Thomas Blackwood. My research had confirmed that a Thomas Blackwood had indeed lived in the house from 1883 until his disappearance in 1886. He had been a historian and amateur scientist whose particular interests included theories of time and preservation. The historical society had little information beyond these basic facts. I set down the letter and leaned back in my chair, listening to the steady rhythm of rain. Eleanor Winters had no connection to Thomas Blackwood that we could find. She had purchased the house just 3 years ago from a family who had owned it for decades. The most logical explanation was that Eleanor had fabricated the story, perhaps after discovering the letter herself and becoming fascinated with the house's history. But this theory had significant flaws. Eleanor had no history of deception or attention-seeking behavior. The psychological evaluation conducted after her report showed no signs of delusion or confabulation. Moreover, the letter had been authenticated by experts as genuinely dating from the late 19th century, with ink and paper consistent with the period. 2 weeks after taking the case, I found myself standing on Eleanor's porch, the wood creaking softly beneath my feet. The librarian invited me in, her movements careful and deliberate. The house smelled of old books and lavender. She led me to the room she had converted into a personal library, where built-in shelves lined the walls from floor to ceiling. "I haven't touched anything," she said quietly, gesturing to a corner of the room where the hardwood flooring showed subtle signs of having been disturbed long ago and carefully replaced. After finding the letter, I noticed these boards seemed different somehow, but I remembered his warning. I knelt down, running my fingers along the seam where the wood changed pattern slightly. "Has your visitor returned?" Eleanor shook her head. "No, but sometimes when it rains heavily like the night he came, I hear footsteps upstairs. When I check, there's never anyone there." We both fell silent, listening to the house settle around us, its old bones shifting imperceptibly. I had no logical explanation for what had happened to Eleanor Winters, no evidence of an intruder, yet no reason to doubt her testimony. The letter remained our only tangible link to something beyond ordinary understanding. I never filed a final report on the case. Some mysteries resist conventional solutions. Some visitors leave no footprints, only questions that linger like the scent of rain on an autumn evening. 3 months later, Eleanor Winters disappeared without a trace. Her house remained locked from the inside, her car parked in the garage, her belongings untouched. The only thing missing was a single book from her collection, a rare volume on manuscript preservation techniques dated 1885. Sometimes on rainy nights, I drive past the empty house on Maple Street. I never stop, never approach the porch where no footprints remain in the soft earth. But I watch the windows, and occasionally I'm certain I see 2 figures moving behind the glass, a tall man in an outdated suit, and a woman with Eleanor's careful, measured movements, turning the pages of a book that perhaps should have remained closed. The floorboards beneath the library remain undisturbed. Some knowledge, as Thomas Blackwood wrote, is better left undiscovered, and some visitors never truly leave. Story 9. I remember the first time I drove down that narrow, tree-lined road to investigate what would become the most unsettling case of my career. It was early October, when the Massachusetts countryside transforms into a canvas of amber and gold, and the morning fog clings to the valleys like a reluctant ghost. The cottage stood alone at the end of a gravel path, its weathered cedar shingles and blue shutters somehow both inviting and forbidding against the backdrop of maple trees. The call had come in 3 days earlier, a woman's voice, steady but threaded with unmistakable fear. "I need someone to document what's happening," she had said. "No one believes me." I'd heard similar openings before, usually preludes to tales of paranoid delusions or neighborhood disputes blown out of proportion, but something in her measured tone made me take notice. Emily Caldwell, 37, a translator who had moved from Boston seeking solitude to finish her latest project, a complex technical translation that required her full concentration. The gravel crunched beneath my boots as I approached the front door. A pair of men's work boots sat neatly on the porch, mud-caked and well-worn. I noted it immediately. Emily lived alone. She answered on the second knock, her eyes darting past me to scan the yard before inviting me in. The cottage interior was exactly what you'd expect: exposed beams, a stone fireplace, hardwood floors that creaked with each step. But something felt off, like walking into a room where a conversation has just abruptly stopped. "Thank you for coming," she said, leading me to a small kitchen table. The cottage smelled of coffee and something else, laundry detergent, fresh and strong. "Would you like some coffee?" Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for a mug from the cabinet. I accepted, watching as she poured from a French press, her movements precise despite her evident anxiety. "Tell me what's been happening," I said, opening my notebook. The pages made a soft, whispering sound as they turned. I clicked my pen twice, a habit I've never managed to break. Emily sat across from me, her fingers curled around her mug. "I moved here 6 weeks ago. The first week was perfectly normal. I unpacked, settled in, started working. Then things began appearing." My pen hovered above the paper, appearing. "Yes," she took a slow breath. "It started with small things, a coffee mug I didn't recognize in the dish rack, a flannel shirt in the laundry basket that wasn't mine. I thought maybe the previous owners had left things behind that I hadn't noticed." I jotted notes, the scratch of pen against paper filling the brief silence. Outside, a wind chime tinkled softly, though I hadn't noticed one when I arrived. "But it didn't stop," she continued. "Every day something new, a book on the shelf I hadn't bought, a pair of reading glasses on the nightstand. Then clothes, men's clothes, folded neatly in the drawers I had emptied when I moved in." The cottage was warm, but I felt a chill settle between my shoulder blades. I've investigated stalking cases before. They typically involve items being taken, not added. This was unusual. "Did you report this to the police?" I asked. A mirthless smile crossed her face. "Twice. The first officer suggested I was simply forgetting about purchases I'd made. The second recommended I change my locks and install cameras." She gestured toward the door. "I did both. The cameras show nothing, and yet..." Emily stood and motioned for me to follow. We walked to a spare bedroom that had been converted into a home office. A large cardboard box sat in the center of the room. "This is everything from yesterday and today," she said quietly. I approached the box and looked inside. A man's wallet worn at the edges. A fishing license issued to Robert Thorne with an address listed as this very cottage. A wedding photo in a silver frame, a younger Emily standing beside a tall man with kind eyes and a crooked smile. I didn't recognize the man, but Emily was unmistakable, though she wore her hair differently. "I've never seen these items before," Emily said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've never known anyone named Robert Thorne. I've never been married. That isn't me in the photo, though it looks like me." I picked up the wallet, feeling its weathered leather. Inside was $43 in cash, a library card, and a hardware store loyalty card, all belonging to Robert Thorne. Everything seemed genuinely aged, not like props or recently manufactured items. "The strangest part," Emily continued, "is what happens when I remove them." She pulled another box from under the desk. "These are duplicates, items I've thrown away or driven to donation centers miles from here. They always come back, or identical versions appear within days. I've investigated many cases over my 15 years as a private investigator, but this defied obvious explanation. We spent the next hour documenting every item that had appeared in the cottage since Emily's arrival. The pattern was fascinating. They created the impression of another life overlapping with hers, as if someone else was simultaneously occupying the space. Later that afternoon, I visited the local town hall. The property records showed the cottage had been owned by the same family for generations, most recently purchased by Emily Caldwell 6 months ago. No record of a Robert Thorne. The Historical Society had no records of him either. The local hardware store recognized the loyalty card but couldn't locate any customer account under that name. As the sun began to set, I returned to the cottage. Emily was sitting on the porch, wrapped in a blanket I didn't recall seeing earlier. "I found something while you were gone," she said, holding out a small leather-bound journal. It was tucked behind the refrigerator when I moved it to clean. The journal contained entries dating back 30 years, all written by Robert Thorne. The final entry was dated exactly 1 year before Emily moved in. "The cottage keeps calling me back. I've tried to leave so many times, but it fills itself with my life over and over. Maybe this time I can truly leave it behind." We spent hours combing through property records going back further than my initial search. 3 days later, we found it, a small newspaper article from 1953. A man named Robert Thorne had disappeared from the area, last seen near his family cottage. The police had suspected his wife, who claimed she had never been married and didn't know any Robert Thorne, despite neighbors' testimonies to the contrary. The case was never solved. Over the next few weeks, I installed additional cameras and motion sensors throughout the cottage. What we captured defied explanation, items appearing not suddenly, but gradually, as if they had always been there, simply becoming visible to the camera over time. Emily finally moved out after 2 months. The cottage was sold again quickly. I've kept in touch with her. She's fine now, living in Vermont with no unusual occurrences in her new home. As for the cottage, I still drive by occasionally. Different owners have come and gone over the past 3 years, none staying longer than 6 months. I sometimes wonder if they too experience the house that keeps filling itself with someone else's life, layer upon layer of existence, like sediment slowly building over time. The last time I visited, the current owner, a young writer seeking inspiration, showed me his latest discovery. A familiar-looking notebook containing detailed notes about disappearing items, written in what looked remarkably like my handwriting. Notes I had never written about an investigation I was seemingly still conducting in a case I had closed years ago. Sometimes I wonder if I ever truly left that cottage, or if part of me is still there, walking through its rooms, documenting the impossible, another layer in the house that keeps filling itself. Story 10. The parcel arrived without a trace of its origins, no hint of its sender in sight, just a weathered cardboard box kissed by the morning dew. It wasn't intended for her. Her address was correct, yet the name was a stranger's. She should have dismissed it, left it to linger on the doorstep, but curiosity whispered in her ear, coaxing her to unravel its mysteries. Slowly, she peeled back the tape, envisioning mundane contents: books, clothing, innocuous items. However, nestled within was a VHS tape, accompanied by a solitary sticky note. "Watch in solitude." Sarah Miller held the dark plastic cassette in her hands, its weight feeling oddly burdensome, as if laden with secrets too weighty to bear. Her fingertips danced along the frayed edges, sensing the stories etched within the worn casing. The handwritten note bore the fervor of its author, each stroke a plea for attention. In the background, the suburban neighborhood hummed its familiar tune, a distant dog's bark, children's laughter, the persistent buzz of a lawnmower. Oblivious to the enigma that had just crossed her threshold, Sarah carried the package indoors, placing it on her kitchen counter. Doubt crept into her thoughts as she examined the label bearing the unfamiliar name, Daniel Whitaker. The name held no significance in her memory, a phantom from a past she had not lived. Her residence had been a sanctuary for years, sheltering her from the outside world. Yet an unspoken invitation lingered in the air, drawing her gaze to the obsolete VCR resting nearby. There was something about the tape, an enigma veiled in shadows of antiquity. Against her better judgment, Sarah inserted the tape into the machine. Static danced on the screen at first, gradually morphing into clarity. A dimly lit room materialized, bathed in the glow of a solitary lamp. The camera angle was askew, casting an air of urgency over the scene. A man sat in a wooden chair, his features shrouded in darkness. "My name is Daniel Whitaker," his voice resonated, a whisper in the dimness. "If you're watching this, they have found you, and they will find me too." Leaning forward, his weary countenance emerged from the shadows, eyes sunken, stubble adorning his face, hair unkempt. "I am innocent. You must believe me." They planted evidence against me, fingerprints, DNA, all fabricated. The camera wavered as Daniel adjusted it, unveiling the starkness of his surroundings, a barren room, devoid of comfort, a transient abode for one on the run. "They framed me. The police report will spin tales of my connection to Catherine Walsh, of our alleged altercation, of false witnesses claiming our quarrel. None of it is true. I only knew of Catherine through the news." His voice faltered. "Dead, murdered in her home. And my DNA, my fingerprints, tainted the crime scene." Detective Eliza Ramirez scrutinized the identical VHS tape on her desk, the latest in a series of cryptic messages from Daniel Whitaker, the prime suspect in Catherine Walsh's murder. A man who had vanished without a trace, leaving behind a trail of doubt and deceit. The Walsh case had seemed straightforward initially, a young woman strangled in her own abode, evidence pointing unequivocally to Whitaker. Yet the emergence of the tapes cast a shadow of uncertainty over the investigation. "The tapes complicate matters," Ramirez murmured into her recorder, grappling with the elusive truth. Was Whitaker orchestrating a grand deception, or unveiling a darker conspiracy lurking in the shadows? Her evidence board painted a fragmented portrait, smiling snapshots of Catherine Walsh, chilling crime scene images, maps tracing the delivery points of the mysterious packages, and at its core, the haunting gaze of Daniel Whitaker in his driver's license photo. The eyes seemed to implore her, beseeching her to unravel the labyrinthine web of lies. The detective's pursuit took a divergent path when she unearthed Catherine Walsh's involvement in a whistleblower case against PharmaCorp, a pharmaceutical juggernaut entwined with government contracts. Walsh had stumbled upon discrepancies in their drug trials, proof of concealed side effects in a new medication hurtling toward approval. She was a whistleblower, a former colleague confided to Ramirez, casting furtive glances over his shoulder. Catherine possessed damning evidence, documents that incriminated top executives. The trial loomed on the horizon. Anomalies began to surface, DNA evidence too pristine, witness testimonies eerily rehearsed, surveillance footage mysteriously corrupted. Sarah Miller received a second package days later, brimming with incriminating documents from PharmaCorp, bearing Catherine Walsh's digital signature. The tide shifted. Ramirez united with the other recipients of the enigmatic tapes, stitching together Whitaker's breadcrumb trail. He had been a silent sentinel in PharmaCorp's IT security, an inadvertent witness to the plot unfolding. They were watching her, Whitaker divulged in a subsequent tape. "I stumbled upon the surveillance directives in the system. They knew she held damning evidence. Then I was locked out and she was dead the next day. Suddenly I was the scapegoat." The investigation fractured the facade of falsehood when Sarah Miller discerned a crucial detail in her copy of the tape, a reflection in a window, revealing a row of storage units. Collaborating with Ramirez, they pinpointed the location. Within Unit 217 lay the crux of the conspiracy: Whitaker's journal chronicling the treachery, Catherine's incriminating files, and damning blueprints authored by PharmaCorp's security chief, a former law enforcer with access to evidence tampering protocols. Justice unfurled not through a blaze of glory, but through the quiet accumulation of irrefutable evidence. 3 executives faced indictments. The security head confessed, striking a deal to expose his superiors. The tainted drug was yanked from the brink of approval. Daniel Whitaker emerged from the shadows, a specter transformed by his time in hiding. Charges against him dissolved, yet the ordeal had etched its mark upon his soul. Sarah Miller and Whitaker crossed paths once more, exchanging fleeting words on her porch, the birthplace of their unlikely connection. "Why me?" she inquired. "Why choose my address for the delivery?" His gaze met hers, weariness etched in his eyes. "The algorithm deemed you safe. I sought individuals untainted by my past, by Catherine's memory, those who might discern the truth amidst the cacophony of lies." The erstwhile suspect, an inadvertent ally, stood in quietude, pondering the fragile boundary between justice and manufactured deceit. Sarah broke the silence. The wrong address proved to be the right one after all. The VHS tapes found solace in the confines of evidence, relics of a truth shrouded in obscurity, awaiting the inquisitive gaze of those willing to peel back the layers. Story 11, the ancient library faced its imminent demise as the workers labored to dismantle its structure. Amidst the chaos, a peculiar discovery halted their progress. A hidden latch, concealed within the depths of a bookshelf, was accidentally triggered by a clumsy worker. With a soft, almost imperceptible click, the entire bookcase swung open, unveiling a secret passage leading to a secluded chamber. The air within was heavy with the weight of time, untouched for decades, holding secrets long forgotten. In the center of the room, a solitary chair stood, firmly bolted to the floor, devoid of any other furnishings. Etched repeatedly on the walls, a haunting message echoed in the dim light: "I am still here." The construction foreman wasted no time and promptly contacted the authorities. What had begun as a routine demolition swiftly transformed into a chilling mystery, beckoning the attention of Detective Morgan Walsh. With 20 years of experience in law enforcement, Walsh had encountered his fair share of enigmatic crime scenes, but none quite like this. Standing at the threshold of the hidden room, his flashlight pierced the darkness, revealing the unsettling message scrawled across the walls. "Secure the area," Walsh commanded the officers present, his voice resonating in the confined space. "No one disturbs anything until the forensics team arrives." The background of the library added an intriguing layer to the unfolding enigma. Once owned by the illustrious Harrington family, the building had been bestowed upon the public following the mysterious disappearance of their daughter, Rebecca. Her vanishing act during her final year of college had left a void in the family's heart, with only her abandoned car discovered near the woods as a clue. Despite extensive efforts, the case had grown cold, with speculation suggesting she had chosen to vanish voluntarily, a theory her family vehemently refuted, convinced of a darker truth. As forensic experts meticulously combed through the hidden chamber, they unearthed traces of hair and fibers embedded in the aged chair. The scratched writings on the wall contained minute remnants of blood and skin cells beneath layers of dust, hinting at a tumultuous struggle. Initial analysis hinted at the biological material belonging to a young female, indicating a grim tale of captivity and torment. Walsh mobilized a team to delve into the Harrington family's history, fixated on the peculiar timing of the library's donation to the public shortly after Rebecca's disappearance. Further scrutiny unearthed a disturbing connection. The contractor responsible for installing the bookshelf was exclusively hired by Maxwell Harrington, Rebecca's uncle and the patriarch of the family. Financial records revealed exorbitant payments to the contractor, far surpassing standard renovation costs, casting a shadow of suspicion over the family's involvement. Former library staff expressed shock at the revelation, with one elderly librarian recalling Maxwell's solitary sojourns in the restricted section of the building after hours. She remembered his adamant insistence on preserving that area untouched during renovations, citing historical significance as his pretext. The pieces of the puzzle were slowly falling into place, painting a grim portrait of deception and betrayal. The investigation took a chilling turn when DNA analysis confirmed a match between the biological samples from the hidden room and Rebecca's hairbrush, recovered from her untouched bedroom. The sinister truth began to unravel. Rebecca had not fled, but had been held captive behind the secret bookshelf, potentially by a member of her own kin. Armed with a warrant, detectives descended upon the Harrington estate, unearthing a leather-bound journal hidden in Maxwell's study. The journal chronicled months of disturbing entries, unveiling an obsessive fixation on his niece that culminated in a chilling ultimatum within the final pages. Confronted with irrefutable evidence, Maxwell's stoic facade crumbled, revealing a dark confession of greed and betrayal. His fear of tarnishing the family name had driven him to imprison Rebecca, leading to a tragic end in a struggle for freedom. As Maxwell's dark deeds came to light, the excavation beneath the hidden room unearthed Rebecca's remains, clad in the silver bracelet gifted to her by her grieving parents on her 20th birthday. The solemnity of justice prevailed as Maxwell faced his sentencing, with the Harrington family silently witnessing the culmination of a long-overdue reckoning. Clutching her daughter's bracelet, Rebecca's mother found solace in the closure finally bestowed upon their shattered family. The library, once slated for destruction, now stood as a somber memorial, adorned with flowers and mementos, honoring a life lost and a truth concealed for far too long. In a poignant twist of fate, Rebecca's haunting message etched on the walls, "I am still here," echoed in the hearts of those who uncovered her story, ensuring that her memory would endure and that the shadows of injustice would be vanquished by the unwavering light of truth. Story 12: The Enigmatic House. The ancient box lay hidden beneath layers of forgotten clutter in the attic, a relic left behind by the previous inhabitants of the old house. Among the faded Polaroids inside, capturing moments of joy and celebration, one image stood out. It depicted a family in the familiar living room, but they were not the faces Rebecca recognized. And there, lurking in the shadows of the hallway, a mysterious figure observed from a distance. As Rebecca gazed at the unsettling photograph, a chill crept up her spine, sending tremors through her fingertips. The family in the picture, frozen in a snapshot of happiness, had no idea of the looming danger behind them. With a sense of unease, she descended the creaking wooden stairs, feeling the weight of the house pressing down on her. Placing the photo on the cold kitchen counter, Rebecca scrutinized it under the harsh glow of the fluorescent light. The eerie resemblance between her home and the strangers in the image was undeniable. The detective, a weathered figure named Morgan, arrived to investigate, his keen eyes absorbing every detail of the Polaroid. Delving into the history of the house's former residents, the detective uncovered a pattern of families disappearing without a trace. The Sutherlands, the missing family from the photograph, had vanished into thin air, leaving no clues behind. Forensic analysis revealed the photo's age and the mysterious presence lurking in the shadows. As the investigation unfolded, a dark truth emerged. Families had come and gone from the house, each one vanishing after precisely 1 year of residence. Rebecca, only 4 months into her stay, found herself entangled in a web of unresolved mysteries spanning decades. Digging deeper, the detective unearthed records of the house's construction, linking the enigmatic figure in the photograph to Samuel Whitfield, a long-deceased architect with a sinister past. The basement yielded grim discoveries, revealing the remains of all the missing families, preserved in a macabre tableau. The house, now a crime scene, held more secrets within its walls. A hidden crawlspace in the attic unveiled a chilling layer of observation, a journal detailing the meticulous surveillance of unsuspecting families. The final entry hinted at a sinister plan unfurling. Rebecca, now under police protection in a hotel, found herself haunted by late-night calls and the ominous sound of a Polaroid camera capturing unseen moments. The mystery of Samuel Whitfield, if that was his true identity, lingered like a ghost in the darkened corridors of the house. As the investigation continued, the house stood silent, its shadows concealing untold truths. The elusive figure in the photograph remained a specter, his intentions shrouded in mystery. And somewhere in a hidden room, new photographs developed, capturing the lives of unsuspecting families under his watchful gaze. The search for answers persisted, but the house held its secrets close, casting a veil of uncertainty over those who dared to uncover the truth. The legacy of Samuel Whitfield lived on, a phantom presence in the hearts of those who sought to unravel the enigma of the house on the hill. Story 13. In the quiet town, whispers never carried the name of the house standing at the edge of the dark woods. Its presence was a mystery, its windows shrouded in shadow, its porch weary from the weight of time. No one laid claim to it, and the origins of its construction had faded into oblivion. But one fateful day, a group of adventurers strayed too close, drawn by an unseen force. To their astonishment, they beheld a peculiar sight, names engraved into the wooden walls, etched deeply like ancient runes of warning. And at the very end of the haunting list, fresh and untouched by time, was a name that sent shivers through their souls, a name none among them recognized, until in a hushed voice one of them trembled, "That's mine." As the night descended, a call pierced the silence, a mere trespassing report according to the logs. The voice belonged to Mason Wright, the intrepid leader who stumbled upon his own name etched into the forsaken dwelling. Law enforcement anticipated a routine case of mischief, perhaps a prank gone awry, but what they encountered defied all rational explanation. Detective Sarah Keller arrived as darkness draped the forest in its cloak, her flashlight cutting through the shadows to reveal the weathered front of the enigmatic house. The names 27 in total etched vertically on the eastern wall, some barely visible, faded by the passage of time, while others remained sharp as if freshly carved. And at the base, Mason Wright, the cut still bearing the scent of fresh wood shavings. "I've never set foot here before," Mason professed, his breath crystallizing in the chilly air. "I cannot fathom how my name came to be here." The inquiry commenced with thorough investigations into the background of each name listed. The findings sent a chill down the spines of the detective team. Every name belonged to an individual reported missing over the past 40 years. Some cases had grown cold, while others remained active. United by a harrowing detail, all had vanished while wandering alone in the woods. Forensic experts meticulously documented each carving, noting the depths, techniques, and weathering patterns. The earliest name, Rebecca Hansen, was linked to a missing persons case from decades past. Search parties had scoured the forest in vain, finding only a lone hiking boot beside a babbling stream. Mason underwent extensive questioning, his account unchanging. He professed no ties to the area beyond the ill-fated hike with his college companions. Their trail selection had been arbitrary, guided by an online suggestion. Nothing in his past hinted at a connection to the other names adorning the wooden wall. Attention shifted to Mason's comrades. Emily Chen, the group's photographer, provided snapshots captured during their trek. Upon examination, analysts noticed a disconcerting anomaly, a blurred figure lurking in the background of 3 photographs. A tall, slender silhouette, always obscured by the veil of trees. "We encountered no one else along the path," Emily insisted. "We would have remembered." Detective Keller ordered a thorough search of the house's interior. Dust blanketed every surface, furniture in disarray, yet in the basement, a chilling tableau awaited. Personal effects of the missing hikers meticulously arranged on wooden shelves. Watches, backpacks, cameras, wallets, each item labeled with a name corresponding to those on the exterior wall. Bloodstains, washed but still visible under ultraviolet light, marred the concrete floor, a grim testament to unseen horrors. Despite the cadaver dog's alerts near the dense forest at the rear of the property, no bodies were unearthed beneath the house. As the investigation deepened, Detective Keller observed a disconcerting shift in Mason's demeanor. He reported eerie incidents, whispers in the night, unexplained footprints leading to his door, spectral figures observing from afar. A guard was assigned to protect him, but paranoia gripped Mason tightly. Breakthrough dawned when buried land records revealed the property's former owner, Victor Blackwood, a reclusive hunter who had vanished without a trace years ago. Neighbor accounts painted a picture of a tall, gaunt recluse who shunned society. Armed with a warrant, Detective Keller delved further into the surrounding forest. Hidden within the dense foliage were crude hunting blinds, strategically positioned along popular trails. In one such blind, a journal was uncovered, detailing meticulous observations of hikers, their movements, gear, and vulnerabilities. The script mirrored known samples of Victor Blackwood's handwriting. Entries evolved from animal hunting techniques to sinister musings on humans as prey, culminating in elaborate plans for their collection. Each victim on the wall had been meticulously stalked, their every move scrutinized. A manhunt spanning multiple jurisdictions ensued, with helicopters equipped for thermal scans scouring the terrain. Tactical units combed every nook and cranny, yet the elusive Blackwood remained a phantom. Mason's whereabouts grew uncertain, his apartment deserted save for a cryptic message etched on the wall. The hunter becomes the hunted. Weeks passed with no sign of Mason or the missing forensic technician. A chilling discovery unfolded during a secondary search of Blackwood's abode, a hidden workshop concealed behind a false panel. Woodworking tools, preservatives, and a freshly carved wooden slab bearing a new name, the technician's. Authorities encircled the house with an unyielding watch, surveillance systems primed for any breach. 3 nights later, sensors blared an alert. Cameras caught a figure emerging from the wood's towering lithe, moving with an otherworldly grace. Tactical units closed in swiftly, only for the cameras to falter briefly. When the feed resumed, the figure had vanished without a trace. To this day, the house remains under constant vigilance. Mason and the technician elude capture, their fate a haunting enigma. The investigation persists, drawing resources anew as similar disappearances unfurl in distant wooded realms. The names on that spectral wall have become a whispered legend, a dread refrain among law enforcers. The house stands as a forsaken sentinel, its secrets buried deep, its walls bearing the names that none dare speak. Story 14. In the quiet of the night, a faint flicker danced across the baby monitor screen, catching the mother's attention. At first, she brushed it off as a mere glitch, a blip in the technological veil that linked her to her slumbering child. But then the crackle of static filled the room, and a soft voice, barely audible, spoke into the darkness. "SHHH, go back to sleep." A chill crept down her spine, freezing her in place. With a racing heart, she dashed to her son's room, only to find the crib empty, devoid of the warmth that should have been nestled within. The window remained shut, the door securely locked. The only anomaly, a stuffed rabbit lying on the floor, its unblinking eyes fixed on her in silent accusation. Rebecca's anguished screams pierced the night, echoing through the walls until her voice was but a hoarse whisper. Frantic neighbors summoned help, and soon the authorities descended upon the scene. There she was, huddled on the nursery floor, clutching the stuffed rabbit as if it were a lifeline in the storm of uncertainty. Samuel, her precious 4-month-old, had vanished without a trace, leaving behind a void that swallowed her whole. The investigation that followed was shrouded in mystery. No forced entry, no disturbance to the security system, just the inexplicable absence of an infant and the haunting echo of that whispered command. Suspicion fell upon Rebecca, her past struggles with postpartum depression casting a shadow of doubt over her grief-stricken facade. Whispers of betrayal and deceit fluttered through the community like a dark omen, painting her as the villain in this tragic tale. But then a glimmer of hope emerged from the shadows of uncertainty. Traces of a foreign fabric, delicate and rare, clung to the nursery windowsill, a silent witness to an intruder's clandestine entry. The threads led the investigators on a new path, away from Rebecca and towards a figure lurking in the periphery of the night. Security footage whispered secrets of a dark silhouette moving with purpose, a ghost in the night with a mission unknown. Daniel, the absent husband, returned to a house steeped in suspicion and accusation. His hands bore the marks of a secret life, calloused from a hobby he had kept hidden, rock climbing a solace or a cover for darker deeds. The pieces began to align, revealing a man with hidden depths, a man with secrets buried deep beneath a veneer of normalcy. Financial records painted a damning portrait, a web of deceit spun with threads of insurance policies and clandestine calls. A second family, a hidden past. Daniel's facade crumbled under the weight of scrutiny, revealing a man capable of unspeakable treachery. And at the heart of it all, the baby monitor, a silent witness to the truth that eluded them all. Digital forensics peeled back the layers of deception, exposing a hack that twisted reality and sowed seeds of doubt. The voice that beckoned in the night, a phantom in the darkness, was but a pawn in a game of twisted desires. And in a basement, a revelation awaited a child, lost but alive, tended to by a woman with vacant eyes and a shattered heart. Elaine, a specter from the past, emerged as the orchestrator of this tragic symphony. Her pain, a festering wound that drove her to unspeakable acts, to steal a child that was never hers to claim. The trial laid bare the web of lies, the tangled threads of betrayal that bound Daniel and Elaine together in a dance of deception. As the courtroom hung on the precipice of judgment, the baby monitor spoke once more, its digital voice echoing with the truth long suppressed. And in that moment the veil of deceit was torn asunder, revealing the malevolent forces that conspired in the shadows. Daniel's cough, a damning echo of guilt, sealed their fates in the eyes of justice. And so, as the gavel fell, a chapter closed on a tale of darkness and deception. Rebecca and Samuel, scarred but resilient, embarked on a journey to leave behind the shadows of the past. The baby monitor, a silent sentinel, remained a silent witness to the horrors that unfolded in the dead of night, a reminder of the fragility of innocence in a world fraught with peril. And as the stars whispered lullabies to a slumbering world, Rebecca tucked away the stuffed rabbit, its glassy eyes a testament to the truth that lurked in the shadows. The monitor never lied, its whispers of the night echoing through the corridors of time, a haunting reminder of the darkness that dwells within the heart of men. Story 15. The worn wooden plank shifted under her weight, revealing a hidden secret beneath her feet. Intrigued, she knelt down and traced the edges, sensing a void beneath the surface. With gentle precision, she lifted the boards, unveiling a dark, narrow space lurking beneath the foundation of her new home. Dust and cobwebs greeted her at first, but soon her eyes adjusted to the dimness, revealing a startling sight. A mattress, a chair, and in the shadows, a weathered notebook filled with repetitions of her own name. Detective Morgan Reed observed silently as Sarah Coleman peered into the darkness below, a mixture of fear and unease reflected in her eyes. It wasn't just a hidden room she had stumbled upon, it was a breach of her sanctuary, a violation of her peace. "Do not disturb anything," Detective Reed cautioned, her voice steady yet commanding. Flicking on her flashlight, she illuminated the concealed chamber, exposing walls adorned with surveillance photograph snapshots capturing Sarah's every move, every interaction, every moment of her life. A shrine of obsession meticulously curated right beneath her unsuspecting steps. Sarah had acquired the quaint cottage from the estate of an elderly recluse named Walter Green, a man who had lived and died in solitude, leaving behind a legacy of hidden chambers and dark secrets. The property had sat vacant for months, its history shrouded in silence until Sarah's arrival. "I never met him, the previous owner," Sarah murmured. "The neighbors spoke of his reclusiveness. I was told the basement was sealed off long ago. The inspection report confirmed it. Crime scene investigators descended upon the scene, their presence echoing through the quiet rooms as they meticulously documented every trace of Walter Green's clandestine surveillance. The mattress, the chair, the notebook, all were carefully extracted from their hiding place, revealing a tapestry of fingerprints belonging solely to the deceased recluse. What sent shivers down the investigators' spines was the timeline they unearthed. Through utility bills and dated photographs, they traced Walter's obsession with Sarah back 3 long years, a silent spectator to her every move. He had shadowed her steps, mirrored her routines, all while remaining a ghostly figure in her peripheral vision. This level of fixation, it evolves, the department's psychologist explained somberly. It moves from fantasy to reality, from obsession to action. The hidden room suggests a plan, a sinister design. Detective Reed's inquiry took a chilling turn when she interviewed Walter's former coworker, a man with a haunted look in his eyes and a confession on his lips. He spoke of her often, the man confessed, twisting his wedding band nervously. Said she reminded him of someone else. "I thought it was harmless infatuation, nothing more." Reed probed further, delving into Walter's past, unearthing a key in his workplace locker that led to a storage unit registered under his name. The metallic door groaned open, revealing a replica of Sarah's former life meticulously recreated in eerie detail, a twisted homage to a woman he had never truly known. A mannequin adorned in Sarah's likeness sat at the desk, a silent sentinel in the macabre tableau. The calendar marked a date just days after Walter's demise, a stark declaration of his delusion. Together, the truth emerged that Walter had a history of fixation, a past marred by delusions of grandeur and unrequited love. His psyche scarred by an unattainable ideal, he had fixated on Sarah, seeing in her a reflection of his unfulfilled desires. Sarah made the decision to leave, to sever ties with the house tainted by the ghostly presence of her voyeuristic predecessor. As she stood in the empty rooms for the last time, she voiced a haunting question to her realtor. What if I hadn't discovered the hidden room? How long would the charade have continued unbeknownst to me? the case closed with Walter's death, labeled as stalking with intent, a label that barely scratched the surface of the horrors that could have unfolded. Sarah relocated, her life forever altered by the brush with darkness that had crept beneath her floorboards. Detective Reed, a silent guardian in the shadows, kept a watchful eye from afar, a reminder of the thin line between safety and danger, between reality and obsession. The cottage passed into new hands, oblivious to the secrets that lay dormant beneath its floorboards. The hidden room sealed off, the past buried with it. Life moved on, but for those privy to the truth, the tale of the chamber beneath the floor whispered of unseen perils, of monsters that slumber in the shadows, and of souls that narrowly escape the clutches of fate. Story 16. In the quiet solitude of her mother's attic, Sarah Winters stumbled upon a forgotten box labeled Memories. Within its weathered confines lay a collection of faded Polaroid photographs, snapshots of a childhood long past. Among the smiling faces and flickering candles, there was one image that caught her eye, a mysterious figure lurking in the background, shrouded in shadow, unnoticed by the joyful revelers in the foreground. As Sarah delved deeper into the photographs, a sense of unease crept over her. In each picture, the enigmatic man seemed to draw closer, his presence unsettling yet inexplicably intertwined with the cherished moments frozen in time. What began as a simple act of reminiscence soon spiraled into a chilling revelation, unraveling a sinister mystery hidden within the frames of innocent celebrations. With trembling hands, Sarah reached out to her father, seeking answers to the enigma that haunted the family photographs. But his response only deepened the mystery, as he professed ignorance of the shadowy figure that had infiltrated their cherished memories. Desperate for clarity, Sarah turned to Detective Marcus Reed, a seasoned investigator with a keen eye for the obscure. Together they pored over the haunting images, the rain outside tapping a somber rhythm against the windows of the precinct. As the detective's gaze lingered on the progression of the figure through the photographs, a sense of foreboding descended upon the room. Each frame revealed a calculated advance, a subtle intrusion into the realm of innocence that sent shivers down Sarah's spine. Through tireless investigation and modern technology, hidden details emerged from the faded Polaroids: a scar, a ring, a glimpse of a face long obscured by darkness. The pieces of the puzzle slowly fell into place, leading to a shocking revelation that connected the shadowy presence to a dark chapter in the region's history. The figure in the photographs was no mere specter, but a malevolent force, a predator who had prowled unnoticed through generations of family gatherings, leaving a trail of unsolved mysteries and shattered lives in his wake. With the discovery of buried secrets and long-lost evidence, the truth emerged from the shadows, exposing a legacy of hidden horrors that had haunted the innocent for decades. As Sarah sat alone in the quiet of her apartment, the weight of the revelations pressing upon her, she knew that closure had come at a steep price. The figure in the family photos had been unmasked, his malevolence laid bare for all to see. Yet in the stillness of the night, she couldn't shake the feeling that some shadows never truly dissipate, lingering on the edge of memory like a ghostly presence waiting to be uncovered once more. And so she closed the box of memories, a silent testament to the unseen threats that lurk within the hidden corners of our past. Story 17. Once upon a time, the new homeowners of the old Victorian manor noticed a peculiar quirk in their home: the crackling of the vintage intercom system late at night. A relic of the past, the system had been rewired but seemingly forgotten over time. Curiosity sparked one fateful night when the husband, drawn by an unexplainable urge, pressed the intercom button. A faint whisper crackled through the speaker, sending shivers down his spine. "Why did you come back?" The words echoed in the dimly lit room, startling him to his core. His wife, standing behind him, denied ever speaking those words, her voice barely a whisper in the stillness of the night. The manor stood in quiet isolation, surrounded by ancient oak trees, its exterior weathered by time yet concealing a modern interior. Daniel and Meredith Parker, the new owners, had acquired the property at a surprisingly low price, despite the real estate agent's uneasy demeanor during the sale. The intercom system, a charming feature that interconnected all rooms, had captivated the history-loving couple, unaware of the secrets it held within its wires. Detective Sarah Reeves arrived at the manor in response to a call about a possible break-in, but there was an underlying tone in the dispatcher's voice hinting at a more profound mystery. Daniel, with a pallid face, led the detective through the elegant foyer, recounting the strange occurrences with the intercom system. Static, whispers, and eventually full sentences had haunted the couple, unraveling a chilling tale within the walls of their new home. In the dimly lit living room, Meredith sat rigid on an antique sofa, her hands tightly gripping a mug that remained untouched. Without preamble, she revealed a startling discovery made behind a wall in the house. As Daniel had begun renovating the kitchen pantry, they stumbled upon a hidden compartment containing a small, deteriorating leather-bound journal. Detective Reeves, gloved hands carefully turning the fragile pages, uncovered the desperate writings of a woman named Eleanor, the previous owner of the manor. Her elegant yet frantic handwriting detailed suspicions of her husband Vincent's malevolent intentions towards her. The final entry, dated 30 years prior, marked the abrupt end of Eleanor's journal, leaving a void in the narrative. The investigation delved deeper, tracing the history of the house back to Vincent and Eleanor Blackwood, the former owners. Records indicated Vincent had sold the house shortly after Eleanor's disappearance, with no legal trace of divorce or relocation. A haunting silence lingered over the unresolved fate of Eleanor, leading the detective and her team to unearth chilling truths buried beneath the house's foundation. Beneath the concrete foundation of the garden shed, ground-penetrating radar revealed anomalies that led to the grim discovery of human remains. Forensic analysis confirmed the skeleton as that of a woman in her 40s, bearing signs of fatal head injuries. Among the remains, a poignant clue emerged: a golden wedding band inscribed with the words, "To Eleanor, my eternal love." The pieces of the puzzle fell into place as the case against Vincent Blackwood solidified. Confined to a care facility in his old age, Vincent calmly acknowledged the charges brought against him, revealing a chilling motive behind his heinous actions. Disconnected from reality, he spoke of Eleanor's ceaseless presence through the intercom, a constant reminder of her alleged betrayal and incessant questioning that drove him to commit a monstrous act. Vincent's confession peeled back layers of deception, exposing a meticulously crafted facade of Eleanor's departure orchestrated by him. The trial swiftly concluded with Vincent pleading guilty to murder, his decades-long charade finally unraveling in the harsh light of justice. Daniel and Meredith, shaken by the revelations, chose to part ways with the house, unable to bear the weight of its dark past. Before bidding farewell, they held a solemn memorial for Eleanor in the garden, a gesture of closure amidst the lingering shadows of the past. The intercom system, once a conduit for unearthly whispers, was removed during renovations by the subsequent owners, unaware of the secrets it had harbored for decades. As the renovation workers dismantled the system, whispers and static echoed through the house, dismissed as mere technical interference. Detective Reeves revisited the Blackwood case file before its archival, reflecting on the enigmatic nature of the house that had seemingly transcended time to unveil its hidden truths. The legacy of Aliner's voice resonated through the corridors of the manor, bringing closure to a long-forgotten tragedy. The house, now free from its dark legacy, stood as a silent witness to the justice that had finally caught up with Vincent Blackwood. Occasionally on her way home, Detective Reeves would pass by the manor, the windows rolled down slightly, listening intently for whispers carried on the gentle breeze. The house that answered back had found its peace, its secrets laid bare to rest in the whispers of the wind. Story 18, The Hidden Observer. The realtor's listing made no mention of a basement. The blueprints revealed no trace of it. Yet as the family peeled back the old carpet, a hidden door emerged, its handle rusted and weighty. It took 3 of them to pry it ajar. Stale air billowed out, heavy with the aroma of moist soil. Descending steps beckoned into darkness. They anticipated storage, but found a solitary chair beneath a swaying light bulb, and on the wall behind it, a sequence of photographs depicting them. Images stolen from within their own dwelling. The Mercers settled into the suburban abode amidst winter's early darkness, when skeletal trees stood stark against the frigid sky. The aged 2-story house, with its worn siding and creaking floors, exuded character, they reassured themselves. Character and history. However, they had not foreseen the depths of history the house harbored, nor how violently it would intertwine with their present. Detective Sarah Connors arrived at the scene with her partner, the crime scene unit already cordoning off the area with fluttering yellow tape. Mrs. Mercer's tremulous voice had relayed the shocking discovery beneath their living room floor. "We must document everything before anyone else descends," Connors directed, donning latex gloves with practiced ease. Camera flashes sporadically illuminated the stairway as the forensic team captured the eerie tableau. The wooden steps strained under their weight. The basement, diminutive in size akin to a standard bedroom, boasted concrete walls painted a drab gray. A solitary chair was affixed to the floor's center. Overhead, the naked bulb cast sharp shadows, twirling slowly in an unseen breeze. Yet it was the row of photographs that seized attention, 37 pictures meticulously arranged in sequence. "These date back nearly 4 weeks, observed Connor's partner, scrutinizing timestamps inscribed on the print's reverses. "Look at this one, Mrs. Mercer asleep on the sofa, Mr. Mercer at the dining table, the children in their chambers." The investigation divulged no signs of forced entry, no shattered windows or tampered locks. The security system had remained dormant. Nothing was pilfered. Privacy alone had been breached, along with any sense of security the family had harbored. Forensic analysis unveiled numerous fingerprints within the basement, predominantly belonging to previous property owners. Records divulged 6 ownership changes in the past decade, each family departing within a year, selling at diminishing prices. None had mentioned unearthing a basement. "We must interview every former owner," Connors instructed, leafing through her notepad. The case grew increasingly disconcerting as they retraced the property's lineage. Property records exposed disparities, blueprints tampered with between sales, permits filed then retracted, inspection reports heavily redacted. A breakthrough arose during the contractor's interrogation, who had renovated the house 7 years earlier. His visage paled upon glimpsing basement photos. "That room is non-existent," he adamantly claimed, his hands quivering. "I stripped that place to its foundation. No basement, no door, nothing beneath the living room save soil and concrete." Digital forensics extracted data from a concealed memory card within the light fixture. A plethora of additional images adorned their evidence boards, not solely of the Mercers, but of prior families, children slumbering, parents quarreling, intimate moments, mundane routines, all surreptitiously captured by an unauthorized observer. A chilling revelation ensued upon unearthing audio recordings from a weatherproof box secreted in the basement's corner. Conversations held in the master bedroom, kitchen, living room were audibly preserved. The sound quality insinuated sophisticated microphones concealed throughout the house, yet none were discovered initially. "We must dismantle every wall," Connors mandated, her tone taut with urgency. "Inspect air vents, light fixtures, electrical outlets. The perpetrator has surveilled these families for years." Beyond the photograph wall, investigators unearthed a narrow passageway leading to a compact monitoring station. A desk, a chair, a laptop linked to an array of wireless cameras, and a journal, its pages crammed with meticulous observations on each family that had resided in the dwelling, their routines, their timetables, their disputes, their vulnerabilities. The script mirrored samples from the property's original constructor, a man named Edward Kelvin. Documentation implied he perished during the house's construction, a fact increasingly dubious as the inquiry unfolded. No death certificate existed. No funeral arrangements were recorded. Edward Kelvin had seemingly evaporated from official records. The journal's closing entries teetered towards delirium. Phrases like "they never looked down" and "they never see me" recurred incessantly. The final page bore a lone sentence: "The next family arrives tomorrow." Fingerprint scrutiny corroborated detectives' growing suspicion Edward Kelvin had never vacated the house he erected. Instead, he had retreated into its concealed recesses, devising an intricate web of observation posts enabling him to watch families who presumed solitude. The pursuit spanned 3 days. Kelvin was unearthed curled inside a crawlspace between second-floor bedrooms, his physique lean and sinewy, acclimated to navigating the cramped passages he had constructed within the walls. His eyes blinked against the flashlight beams, unaccustomed to direct illumination. During interrogation, Kelvin portrayed the families as actors in his private drama. He detailed observing them with the detached objectivity of a scientist scrutinizing specimens. He had not physically intruded, pilfered, or directly interfered with their lives. He had merely observed, documented, recorded. "They welcomed me," he informed investigators, his voice calm and rational. "They signed the deeds. They became mine." Psychological assessment diagnosed Kelvin with severe delusions, perceiving himself as a custodian of the house rather than an interloper. The families were ephemeral guests in what he regarded as his enduring abode. The Mercers never returned to the property. Like their predecessors, they deserted their possessions, salvaging only essentials in suitcases. The house lay vacant as the case navigated the legal system. The trial unveiled the extent of Kelvin's surveillance network, hidden chambers accessible solely via crawlspaces, observation points integrated into the house's framework, all meticulously planned ere the first brick was laid. The house had been conceived as a voyeuristic apparatus from its inception, its tenants unwitting participants in Kelvin's obsessive documentation. When the jury rendered their verdict, Kelvin displayed no reaction. He had already retreated into the labyrinth of his psyche, where he could still traverse unnoticed through the house's passages now existent solely in recollection. The property was eventually razed, its subterranean depths excavated and filled. Yet for the families who had dwelt there, the violation endured. They remained haunted not by what was wrested from them, but by what lay concealed, watching, listening, recording their most intimate moments from within walls they trusted to protect them. At times, in hushed instances, they caught themselves glancing upwards at air vents, light fixtures, the junctures where walls met ceilings, pondering if they were indeed solitary now, pondering if they ever had been. Story 19. Nestled in the shadows of a quiet suburban neighborhood, a mysterious tale unfurled like a whispered secret. It began with a single brass key, its luster dulled by time, arriving in the mail of a homeowner named Sarah Miller. Wrapped in a plain envelope with no return address, the key seemed to carry a weight of unspoken history. With a sense of eerie familiarity, Sarah tried the key in every lock she owned, but each one remained unmoved, refusing its entry. Perplexed, she placed the key on her coffee table, and in that moment the stagnant air was pierced by the solemn echo of a grandfather clock in the hallway, a clock long silenced, yet stirred to life by the presence of the enigmatic key. Intrigued and unsettled, Sarah reported the strange occurrence to the authorities, setting into motion a series of events that would unravel the tranquil fade of the neighborhood. The responding officer, initially dismissive, took possession of the key, a seemingly innocuous object that would soon reveal a chilling connection to a dark and twisted past. As the key found its way into the hands of Detective Robert Harmon, a seasoned investigator with a keen intuition for the obscure, its silent presence on his desk whispered of secrets long buried. Background checks on Sarah yielded no red flags, painting a picture of an ordinary woman caught in the inexplicable web of the unknown. Forensic examinations unveiled no fingerprints on the key save for Sarah's own, and the envelope offered no clues beyond a generic postmark. The key itself, a standard Schlage, bore the scars of time, hinting at a history shrouded in shadows. A break in the case came unexpectedly when Detective Harmon delved into the department database, unearthing a chilling connection between the key and a cold case from years past, a case marked by blood-stained carpets, chilling tools, and photographs of missing women, their faces frozen in silent terror. The key, a silent witness to unspeakable horrors, led the investigation down a dark path, revealing a twisted trail of deceit and malevolence. With each revelation, Sarah's unease deepened, prompting her to fortify her home against unseen threats lurking in the shadows. As the investigation unfolded, the elusive figure of Harold Jenkins emerged from the shadows of the past, a man cloaked in mystery, his presence a sinister specter haunting the tranquil streets of the neighborhood. Jenkins, a ghostly figure with a trail of unanswered questions in his wake, became the focal point of a nationwide manhunt. The true extent of Jenkins' depravity came to light when investigators unearthed a hidden chamber beneath his abandoned cabin, a chamber lined with rows of brass keys, each one a grim testament to lives extinguished in the darkness. The hunt for Jenkins intensified, culminating in a dramatic confrontation that left the enigmatic figure dead by his own hand, his secrets buried with him in the depths of the wilderness. Yet the legacy of his atrocities lingered, casting a long shadow over those touched by his malevolence. In the aftermath, as the community grappled with the revelation of unspeakable evil in their midst, Sarah found herself adrift in a sea of unanswered questions, haunted by the specter of a darkness that had brushed so close to her ordinary life. The grandfather clock, once a harbinger of eerie chimes, now stood as a silent sentinel, a reminder of the horrors that had lurked just beyond the threshold of her home. And in the quiet of the night, the collection of brass keys sat in an evidence locker, each one a silent witness to the devastating truth that some secrets are too dark to ever be fully unraveled. Story 20. The apartment had sat in silence for months, its secrets hidden within its walls. When the new tenants crossed the threshold, they expected only dust and echoes of the past. But one door resisted their curiosity, a closet locked tight from within. The landlord, with a heavy sigh, forced it open, revealing a chilling sight that sent shivers down their spines. The walls bore witness to a silent struggle, etched with deep, uneven scratches that spoke of desperation and confinement. In the corner lay an ancient flip phone, its screen still softly glowing with a single unread message. Detective Morgan Shaw, seasoned in the ways of darkness, felt a chill dance down her spine at the sight. There were no obvious traces of violence, no crimson stains to mark the scene. Yet the scratch marks told a tale of their own, a tale of someone trapped, fighting against the confines of the tiny space. "Call forensics," Shaw murmured to her partner, Officer Reed, whose camera clicked away at the haunting evidence, "and gather the records of the previous tenants." The message on the phone whispered haunting words, "I know what you did." The landlord, fidgeting nervously, spoke of a quiet tenant who had vanished without a trace, leaving behind unpaid debts. "A young woman kept to herself, left about 6 months ago," he muttered, avoiding the closet's gaze. Forensics uncovered a chilling truth within the scratches: traces of blood, mostly belonging to a woman named Emma Caldwell, missing for months. Yet 2 DNA samples stood out, one unidentifiable, the other belonging to a man long declared dead. Shaw's brow furrowed in confusion at the revelation. Emma's apartment painted a portrait of interrupted life, letters unanswered, coffee mugs cold, the bed neatly made. Her phone records whispered of a mysterious caller, of secrets left unspoken. The sister mentioned a mysterious boyfriend, Reed reported, his voice edged with concern. Surveillance footage unveiled a shadowy figure following Emma into the building, a man in a baseball cap, his features carefully obscured from view. And the fingerprints on the closet's doorknob whispered a name long thought buried: Derek Mercer, a man presumed dead. As the pieces fell into place, a web of darkness unfurled before Shaw's eyes. Lynette Porter's disappearance intertwined with Emma's fate, leading them to a remote property owned by the elusive Mercer family. Behind locked doors, they found Lynette alive but broken, a mirror image of Emma's ordeal. "He made me watch," Lynette's voice trembled, haunted by the memories of captivity. Shaw's heart clenched at the horror that had unfolded within those walls. Journals, photographs, and videos painted a portrait of a man consumed by control and cruelty. The manhunt for Derek Mercer spanned borders, his trail of darkness stretching far and wide. And as they finally closed in on him at a bus terminal, a sense of closure loomed on the horizon. Mercer, with his calm demeanor, held onto his twisted truths with a chilling resolve. The trial unveiled Mercer's elaborate charade, a scheme of death and deception that had ensnared unsuspecting victims. Emma's body remained a mystery, lost to the shadows of that cursed closet. The jury's swift verdict sealed Mercer's fate, but his enigmatic smile held secrets untold. At the sentencing, Lynette's words echoed through the courtroom, a beacon of resilience in the face of darkness. The case left its mark on Shaw, reshaping the way they approached missing persons investigations, a reminder that evil can lurk in the most unexpected places. And as Detective Shaw gazed upon the closet door mounted in her office, she knew that some horrors leave scars that no amount of time can erase, a reminder that survival is a triumph, even in the shadow of unspeakable evil. Story 21. Tale unfolds in the twilight hours, shrouded in mystery and whispers of the unknown. In a quaint costume shop on the brink of closure, the remnants of forgotten treasures awaited their fate. Among the relics, a woman's hand reached for a mask veiled in dust, its intricate features both delicate and eerily lifelike. As she placed it upon the worn counter, a subtle unease lingered in the air. The cashier's voice wavered as he murmured, "That's not ours." Perplexed, the woman sought a tag, only to find none. With a nonchalant shrug, she carried the mask to her humble abode, unaware of the enigmatic path it would unfurl before her. That fateful night, a soft rustle roused her from slumber, a mere whisper of fabric in the stillness. Her eyes sought the nightstand where the mask had rested, only to discover its presence, now facing her in silent vigil. Catherine Reed, the woman entwined in this tale of shadows, was discovered by a concerned neighbor. Ajar stood her front door, allowing a sliver of morning light to pierce the darkness within. Instead of a borrowed book, the neighbor found a haunting scene etched in their memory, a lifeless figure sprawled upon the bedroom floor, the mask vanished without a trace. Detective Morgan, a seeker of truths in the labyrinth of the unknown, arrived at the somber scene. Clicks of shutters punctuated the hushed atmosphere as forensics meticulously captured each detail. Amidst the ordinary, anomalies whispered their secrets: ajar drawers, a lipstick-stained glass, a life extinguished with a frozen visage of terror. The medical examiner's solemn words echoed through the room, hinting at mysteries veiled beneath the surface. No visible wounds, no signs of struggle, only the echo of fear etched upon Catherine's countenance, a silent witness to her demise. In the aftermath, a trail of breadcrumbs led the detective to the costume shop's murky past. The owner's nervous confession unveiled a legacy of inexplicable occurrences tied to a deceased collector, their estate's sale seeding darkness into the world of the living. Forensics unraveled a cryptic thread, microscopic fibers entwined with Catherine's essence, whispering of a spectral touch from beyond the veil. Each victim, like a moth drawn to flame, had acquired a mask of dread before succumbing to an untimely end, their faces etched with the stamp of ultimate horror. A retired detective, keeper of past enigmas, shared a revelation veiled in ancient symbols, a ritual of soul transference woven into the fabric of time. Catherine's journal, a beacon in the sea of shadows, bore witness to the mask's insidious nature, a malevolent entity seeking vessels to inhabit, a cycle of death and rebirth spanning centuries. As the investigation delved deeper, a chilling truth emerged: extreme fear, a silent killer shrouded in the guise of the mask's dreadful embrace. Surveillance footage unveiled a phantom figure, a mimicry of life donning Catherine's form with mechanical precision, a harbinger of impending doom. The mask, a harbinger of darkness, slipped through the cracks of time and space, elusive as a wisp of smoke. Its hunger unquenched, its gaze fixed upon the next unwitting soul to cross its path, a vessel waiting to be claimed in the dance of fate. And so the detective, keeper of untold secrets, holds Catherine's journal close, a silent testament to the shadows that linger in the night. For in the depths of slumber, whispers of the mask's return echo through the darkness, a reminder of the cyclical nature of fear and the eternal dance of light and shadow. Story 22. The worn envelope, aged and tinged with yellow, bore a fresh stamp, as if it had just begun its journey. With caution, the detective unfolded it, revealing a single sheet of paper holding a message typed in a rushed, uneven script. "I am sorry for what I did." The paper exuded a dampness, carrying with it a faint scent of iron that lingered in the air. It was then that the detective's gaze caught the reddish smear along the bottom edge, a stark revelation that this was no ordinary correspondence. Detective Sarah Morgan, with practiced precision, secured the letter in an evidence bag, her gloved hands ensuring no detail was overlooked. The forensics team had already confirmed her suspicions. The reddish stain was human blood, a chilling link to an unsolved homicide case that had haunted the department for years. The victim, a young journalist named Rebecca Warren, had been discovered in her apartment, bearing multiple stab wounds. Her laptop was missing, her notes strewn about, hinting that her assailant may have been connected to a story she was pursuing. Despite exhaustive interviews and countless hours of investigation, the case had grown cold until this ominous letter arrived, simply addressed to Homicide Division. The paper and envelope yielded minimal fingerprints, only faint smudges indicating the sender's cautiousness. The postmark provided a rare light after months of stagnation. Gathering her team in the dimly lit briefing room, Detective Morgan faced the array of crime scene photos, timelines, and suspect profiles that had yielded no breakthroughs. Pinning the letter's image at the heart of the board, she declared, "This changes everything. Our culprit shows remorse." Detective James Chen, her steadfast partner since the case's inception, scrutinized the letter. "Or perhaps they wish us to believe so," he countered. The blood could be a calculated act, a twisted form of taunting. Tracing the unique typewriter impression to a model long out of production, the forensics team embarked on a search across antique shops and collectors in the region. As the investigation gained traction, they delved into Rebecca's life, uncovering her relentless pursuit of truth and justice. Her latest assignment had entangled her with a wealthy family embroiled in local politics, their internal strife heightened by a controversial inheritance and suspicions of foul play. Interviewing Rebecca's boyfriend, Michael Barnes, revealed subtle shifts in his behavior since the letter's appearance. Rebecca feared she was being followed, he confessed, his voice tinged with regret. "I dismissed her concerns, believing them born of investigative paranoia. I should have listened." Amidst their inquiries, a second letter arrived, bearing the same typewritten message in blood-stained confession. She delved too deeply into the family secrets, the inheritance, the patriarch's demise. It was never meant to escalate in such a manner. The trail led to the mansion of the deceased patriarch, where the eldest son, Richard, possessed a collection of antique typewriters. His composed demeanor faltered under scrutiny, his explanations rehearsed and unconvincing. A breakthrough emerged when microscopic fibers on the envelopes matched stationery exclusive to the family's youngest daughter, Eleanor. Further investigation unearthed a hidden chamber in Richard's home, housing incriminating evidence clippings about Rebecca, surveillance materials, and the vintage typewriter used in the letters, its bloodstains confirming Rebecca's tragic end. Unexpectedly, financial records unveiled substantial transactions between Richard and Michael prior to the murder. Confronted, Michael confessed, revealing a chilling truth. His betrayal of Rebecca's trust had unwittingly sealed her fate at Richard's hands. Eleanor's revelation of a damning recording, capturing Richard's sinister intentions, solidified the case. Arrested in an attempted escape, Richard adamantly denied guilt during the trial, deflecting blame onto Michael. However, the evidence, from the cryptic letters to the financial ties, left no room for doubt. The jury swiftly returned a guilty verdict, sealing Richard's fate. As he was led away, Detective Morgan approached Rebecca's grieving parents, offering solace in the form of justice served. The blood-stained letters remained in evidence, a somber reminder that even the most meticulously planned crimes leave behind indelible traces. The saga of Rebecca Warren became a cautionary tale in detective lore, underscoring that sometimes the key to unlocking a mystery lies not in high-tech gadgets, but in the echoes of a vintage typewriter and the weight of guilt that eventually unravels even the most cunning of killers. Story 23. The aged apartment possessed its idiosyncrasies, pipes groaning, floorboards whispering secrets. Yet the fresh occupant sensed a difference in the sounds she heard. The footsteps were too steady, too purposeful. They echoed from above, deliberate and slow, but she resided on the highest floor. One evening she mustered the courage to tap on the ceiling with a broomstick. The noise ceased. Silence enveloped the room. Then a solitary knock reverberated from within the ceiling. Sarah Coleman chose not to disclose the knocking incident to anyone. She convinced herself that it was merely the building settling, or perhaps a small creature finding refuge in the attic space. Despite the nightly continuation of the footsteps, she adapted, raising the volume of her television, donning headphones to sleep, anything to drown out the methodical footfalls traversing her ceiling in the shadows. Detective Morris became acquainted with the apartment when a maintenance worker stumbled upon a concealed crawlspace during routine repairs. The worker had dismantled a section of drywall in the hallway adjacent to Sarah's apartment to mend a water leak. Behind it, he stumbled upon a narrow passageway that defied the building plans. When he shone his flashlight inside, the beam illuminated a makeshift dwelling, scattered food wrappers, discarded water bottles, a soiled blanket, and a small notebook. The building superintendent promptly contacted the authorities. Detective Morris arrived with his partner, Detective Rivera, to find the maintenance worker pallid and trembling. "Someone has been residing in the walls," he repeated incessantly. "Someone has been observing." The notebook contained meticulous observations of Sarah Coleman, her routines, her visitors, her dinner choices, her television preferences, her shower times, her sleeping patterns. The handwriting commenced neatly but deteriorated into chaos towards the final pages, with strange symbols adorning the margins. "The subject no longer responds to my signals," the concluding entry read. "She has chosen to ignore me. No one ignores me." Forensics teams scoured the crawlspace, uncovering fingerprints that matched no records in any database. They stumbled upon an intricate network of passageways integrated into the walls and ceilings of the building, some tracing back decades according to structural analysis. The passages linked to 5 different apartments, culminating in observation points, tiny apertures disguised as fixtures or minor damages in only one, Sarah Coleman's. The investigative team interviewed current residents who reported nothing extraordinary beyond the typical apartment clamor. Former residents recounted a different narrative. 3 prior tenants of Sarah's apartment expressed sensations of being watched or hearing inexplicable movements. One had vacated after a mere fortnight. None had vocalized their encounters, fearing they would be dismissed as paranoid. A breakthrough emerged when forensics unearthed minute blood spatters in one of the crawl spaces. DNA testing connected them to Martin Weaver, a former resident who had vanished without a trace 4 years prior. His family had filed a missing persons report, but the trail had grown cold. He had inhabited the apartment directly beneath Sarah's. Detective Morris revisited Martin's disappearance. According to neighbors, Martin had grumbled about noises emanating from above his apartment. He had confronted the tenant residing above him at the time, a reserved individual named Edward who kept to himself. Shortly thereafter, Martin vanished. Edward vacated the premises the subsequent month, leaving no forwarding details. Investigators delved into Edward's rental history and unearthed a pattern. He had dwelled in 6 distinct apartment buildings over 2 decades. In each instance, he had sought top-floor units, forged minimal social connections, and eventually absconded without notice. A neighbor from his 3rd abode recollected him as intense and recalled his incessant grievances about requiring silence. The investigators unearthed property records indicating that Edward had procured remote rural property. Upon reaching the site, they stumbled upon a cabin adorned with photographs and notes, images of denizens from various apartment buildings, inclusive of Sarah Coleman and Martin Weaver, maps delineating ventilation systems and structural vulnerabilities, elaborate journals detailing observations of the specimens and upholding the habitat. At the heart of the cabin stood a corkboard adorned with newspaper clippings. Missing persons reports, 6 in total, all former residents from buildings where Edward had resided. Deep gouges scarred the wooden floor beneath the board, hinting at something substantial being dragged repeatedly. Beyond the cabin, cadaver dogs led investigators to a freshly disturbed patch of soil. Excavation unveiled human remains. Subsequent graves emerged. As forensic anthropologists commenced the somber task of identifying the victims, Detective Morris retraced his steps to Sarah's apartment building. The crawl spaces had been sealed off, yet residents reported sporadic noises persisting. Maintenance workers installing new security systems stumbled upon an object wedged in a corner where the ceiling met the wall in the hallway, a fresh notebook, newer than the first one discovered. The initial page bore a single line: "They found my old nest, but not my new one." The handwriting mirrored that of the prior notebook. The final page showcased a crude illustration of Sarah's apartment layout with a new passage delineated in red and a date for that evening. Officers hastened to evacuate Sarah, only to find her abode deserted. Her phone rested on the kitchen counter. Her television remained on. Her shower was running. Within the bathroom, steam veiled the mirror. As it dissipated, a message materialized, etched by a finger on the glass: "Look up." The ceiling panel above the shower had been dislodged. The hunt for Edward, now identified as Edward Mercer, a former construction worker specializing in renovations, carries on. His expertise in building structures facilitated the creation of his covert network of observation points and passages. Thermal imaging scans of Sarah's building unveiled no signs of current occupation within the walls. Sarah Coleman remains missing. Her case intertwines with similar disappearances across multiple states. Authorities have issued alerts to apartment building managers regarding unauthorized alterations in concealed spaces. The image that haunts Detective Morris most isn't the graves or the journals or even the photos of unsuspecting residents. It's the image of Sarah, night after night, listening to those footsteps above her in an apartment devoid of an upstairs neighbor. The footsteps that halted when she rapped and then responded. Sometimes, during nocturnal solitude in his own abode, Detective Morris discovers himself gazing up at his ceiling, listening, waiting, pondering who else might be listening too. Story 24: The Mystery of the Whispering House. She desired to give the nursery a fresh coat of paint before the little one's arrival. The walls wore a faded blue hue, holding within them untold tales of days gone by. As she brushed on the first layer of white paint, a hidden secret emerged, a faint message etched beneath the surface. "Don't let it hear you." Her breath hitched in her throat. Stepping back, she noticed something peculiar: tiny handprints imprinted in the wet paint, too high for a child to reach. This discovery in the nursery of the Morgan residence marked the inception of what would later be dubbed the Whispering House case. The young couple had recently bought the Victorian-style home at an unbelievably low price, unaware of its dark past. Detective Sarah Klein, notebook in hand, arrived at the house. A pregnant woman, her belly swollen beneath paint-stained overalls, answered the door. Dark circles framed her eyes, evidence of sleepless nights. She trembled as she recounted finding the hidden message and handprints. The previous owners vanished abruptly, the woman disclosed. Neighbors claimed they left in the dead of night, packing only essentials into their car, no moving truck in sight. Detective Klein, her footsteps echoing on the creaky floorboards, explored the historic home. In the nursery, she inspected the partially painted wall, the cryptic message still visible where the painting had ceased. Beside it, 5 child-sized handprints left in the wet paint at adult height. Back at the precinct, Detective Klein delved into the property's records. The house had changed hands numerous times in 3 decades, with families residing for unusually brief periods. More troubling were the child welfare reports linked to 3 of those families. Children mentioned hearing whispers from the walls and feeling watched as they slept. Further investigation uncovered that the house once belonged to Eleanor Blackwood, a wealthy widow who ran an orphanage on the premises in the early industrial era. Newspaper clippings hinted at 5 children who had mysteriously disappeared from her care, presumed to have run away. During renovations after Eleanor's passing, workers discovered a sealed room behind the nursery wall containing children's belongings, but no remains. Detective Klein interviewed former residents, piecing together a chilling picture of recurring strange incidents within the house involving children. A forensic linguist confirmed that the hidden messages matched Eleanor Blackwood's handwriting from her journals. Even more unsettling were the identical handprints left by different children over the years, appearing whenever the nursery was repainted. The investigation took a macabre turn when the detective arranged for ground-penetrating radar in the basement. Anomalies in the readings led to the discovery of 5 child-sized shapes beneath the concrete floor. Upon excavation, 5 sets of remains were unearthed, each child wearing a pendant engraved with their name. Luminol revealed countless handprints on the nursery walls, invisible to the naked eye, as if the children had desperately sought escape. Eleanor's journals detailed her twisted beliefs, aiming to harness the orphan's energy to prolong her life. With the victims laid to rest, the house remained vacant as the couple refused to return. Detective Klein closed the case, but an eerie presence lingered within the walls, reaching out through time and paint layers. The nursery walls were torn down, workers reporting ghostly whispers amidst the debris, refusing to return after hours. The house was eventually condemned, a chilling reminder of unresolved mysteries. The detective preserved a photograph of the glowing handprints, a haunting testament to the lingering echoes of a dark past. Story 25. In a quaint coffee shop that had become his sanctuary, a man with no name had his daily ritual: same table, same order, same quiet contemplation. The barista recognized his face, but his identity remained a mystery to everyone else. Then one fateful day he didn't show up. Concerned, the police investigated and found his abandoned wallet at his usual spot. Oddly, his driver's license bore a photo of him, yet all personal details were conspicuously absent. Detective Sarah Mercer delved into the case, studying the perplexing security footage repeatedly. The man, now dubbed John Doe, seemed like any other patron, unremarkable in appearance, blending into the background with his routine. But his vanishing act defied all logic. He entered, he sat, but he never left. As Mercer scrutinized the footage, a peculiar detail emerged. Each time John entered the shop, a subtle flicker distorted the time stamp. Despite the tech specialist's dismissal of it as a glitch, Mercer sensed there was more to this anomaly. The investigation led Mercer to the man's table, where his abandoned wallet and a cryptic notebook filled with coded writings remained. The notebook hinted at a deeper mystery, with sketches of unfamiliar buildings and cryptographers puzzled by its contents. Digging further, Mercer uncovered a hidden compartment behind an ancient mirror in the shop. Inside were identical wallets with blank information fields and a journal penned by John Doe himself, detailing experiments in temporal manipulation and identity transference. The journal hinted at a convergence of realities at the coffee shop, with the mirror serving as a gateway between worlds. Strange occurrences began to plague the area, with witnesses claiming to see John Doe's spectral presence and reflections moving independently. A breakthrough came when an elderly physicist, Margaret Keller, shed light on John Doe's true identity as Daniel Weston, a brilliant scientist who had vanished while researching quantum mirrors. Weston believed in the existence of parallel realities and sought to traverse them through specific anchor points. Mercer's investigation led her to the coffee shop's historical connection to Weston's research facility, revealing that the building stood atop the very lab where he disappeared. The enigma deepened when Mercer discovered a chilling detail in the security footage, a reflection of Weston watching himself at the table, two versions of him coexisting. The climax arrived when Mercer witnessed the shattered mirror at the shop, a note from Weston warning against further pursuit. The experiment was over, the window closed. The man who straddled realities was gone, leaving behind a legacy of unanswered questions. The unresolved case lingered, haunting the memories of those involved. The coffee shop faded into obscurity, its secrets buried beneath rubble. Daniel Weston's fate remained elusive, his notebooks vanishing mysteriously. Detective Mercer, marked by the encounter, retreated into solitude, her gaze fixed on a fragment of the antique mirror, a reminder of the blurred boundaries between worlds. Story 26, Uncovering the Unexpected. Renovations always have a way of unearthing peculiar things, forgotten relics from the past, hidden treasures obscured by time. Yet, when Sarah and Michael began their restoration project on their newly acquired Victorian-era home, they never anticipated stumbling upon a mystery that would send shivers down their spines. Beneath the aged floorboards, nestled within the darkness, lay a neatly folded letter, its yellowed paper crackling with age. The ink, once bold, now faded with the passage of time, bore a cryptic message: "Don't trust the one who knocked." As the weight of those words settled in, 3 distinct knocks reverberated through the empty halls, freezing the couple in place with a chilling realization. Their abode, steeped in rich history and adorned with intricate moldings, held secrets far darker than its ornate facade suggested. Detective Alina Reed, a seasoned investigator with a keen eye for the enigmatic, arrived to delve into the unsettling discovery alongside her partner. With the floorboard still upturned, exposing the hidden depths below, Reed's weathered hands, accustomed to the touch of evidence, carefully retrieved the ominous note, mindful of the inadvertent contamination by the homeowners. The couple's apprehension was palpable as they recounted the haunting sound that had disturbed their peace. Background checks on Sarah and Michael revealed no cause for suspicion, just a pair of newlyweds with impeccable records and stable lives. However, the house itself harbored a tangled web of history. Previously belonging to the reclusive Hargrove family, the dwelling had stood vacant for years following the passing of its last inhabitant, Margaret Hargrove, an elderly widow with no known adversaries. Despite the lack of overt foul play surrounding Margaret's demise, a sense of unease lingered. Forensic analysis dated the cryptic note back 2 decades, its distressed handwriting hinting at a past fraught with fear and urgency. Franklin, Margaret's late husband, a respected former teacher with a penchant for woodworking, seemed to hold a key to the unsettling puzzle. As Reed delved deeper into the Hargroves' past, a portrait emerged of a man haunted by paranoia in his final years, a man who spoke of unseen watchers and looming threats. Franklin's former student recalled his descent into suspicion, a precursor to the tragic events that would unfold within the walls of their once happy home. A breakthrough came with an interview of Margaret's fading sister, who whispered of a shadowy figure known as the Collector, a man tied to Franklin's gambling debts and the ominous 3 knocks that had haunted their lives. Franklin's refusal to part with their cherished abode to settle his debts had set a grim chain of events in motion. Revisiting the house with a team of forensic experts, Reed's investigation took a grim turn as the secrets hidden beneath the floorboards were unveiled. The cadaver dog's discovery of a male skeleton buried beneath the foundation, bearing the unmistakable marks of violence, shattered any illusions of a peaceful resolution. Further excavation unearthed the identity of the long-lost figure Victor Mercer, a notorious loan shark and enforcer for illegal gambling operations who had vanished without a trace 2 decades prior. The pieces of the puzzle fell into place with the aid of Margaret's hidden diaries, chronicling a tale of fear, desperation, and ultimately tragic choices made in the name of love. The house's dark past, now laid bare, stood as a testament to the horrors that had unfolded within its walls. Sarah and Michael, unable to bear the weight of its grim legacy, chose to part ways with the property, leaving it abandoned to the whispers of local lore. Rumors swirled of spectral echoes in the dead of night, of 3 distinct knocks that seemed to resound through the empty corridors, a haunting reminder of the mysteries that lay buried within. Detective Reed's final report acknowledged that some truths defy resolution, lingering in the shadows even as justice, long delayed, found its way to the light. The letter, with its ominous warning etched in fading ink, remained a silent sentinel in evidence storage, a chilling testament to the secrets that dwell in the heart of even the most seemingly tranquil abodes. And as the house stood silent and forsaken, its story whispered on the winds, a cautionary tale of the perils that lie hidden beneath the surface, waiting to be unearthed by those who dare to delve into the shadows of the past. Story 27. In the depths of the attic, concealed beneath a worn blanket, they stumbled upon a hidden treasure. A porcelain doll, exquisite yet aged, with piercing blue eyes that seemed to hold secrets of their own. Sarah and Michael, a young couple who had recently acquired the old Victorian house, brushed off the discovery as just another forgotten relic from a bygone era. But as night descended and they retired to their bed, a subtle unease settled in the air. The stillness of the house seemed to stretch endlessly, wrapping around them like a heavy shroud. And when morning dawned, the doll had vanished from the attic, only to reappear at the foot of their bed, a silent sentinel in the dim light. The house they had purchased at auction beckoned to them with its intricate woodwork and enigmatic allure, oblivious to the shadows that lurked within its walls. Sarah and Michael had been captivated by the history woven into the very fabric of the house, unaware that they were about to become entwined in its tangled web. Detective Rachel Winters, a meticulous investigator, was summoned on a crisp autumn morning to the scene of a chilling crime. In the master bedroom lay the female victim, her limbs contorted into unnatural angles, her eyes wide with a frozen expression of terror. Nearby in the hallway, the male victim seemed to have met a futile end in his attempt to flee. The crime scene was pristine, devoid of any signs of forced entry or struggle, save for the haunting positions of the victims. Detective Winters observed with a hushed intensity, noting the deliberate arrangement that mirrored a macabre doll's display. The investigation unfurled like a sinister tapestry, each thread weaving a tale of dread and mystery. Neighbors whispered of shadows glimpsed in the windows, of phantom laughter echoing through the empty halls in the dead of night. The forensic team unearthed traces of antique fabrics, akin to those used in doll clothing, concentrated around the victims, and the attic a silent witness to unseen hands at play. As the layers of the past were peeled back, a pattern emerged, a history marred by inexplicable deaths and eerie occurrences. 3 prior owners had met untimely fates, their lives cut short under enigmatic circumstances that defied rational explanation. A newspaper clipping from decades past shed light on a dark chapter in the house's history, a doll maker whose creations held a sinister allure. His final masterpiece, a doll fashioned in the likeness of his deceased daughter, bore an uncanny resemblance to the one that now haunted Sarah and Michael. Through hidden photographs and spectral handprints etched in invisible ink, Detective Winters traced a chilling connection between the victims and the malevolent spirit that seemed to linger within the house. Whispers of arcane rituals and bound spirits cast a pall over the investigation, plunging it into an abyss of uncertainty. The mystery deepened as the doll maker's distant relative revealed tales of forbidden arts and unholy creations, hinting at a darkness that transcended the realm of the living. The truth eluded them, slipping through their grasp like shadows in the night. In a final act of defiance, Detective Winters sought to contain the malevolent force within the doll, sealing it away in a secure cabinet. But the following day brought a baffling revelation: the doll had vanished, leaving behind a void of unanswered questions and lingering dread. The house passed into new hands, its haunted legacy whispered among the curious and the wary. The attic remained a silent witness to the mysteries that lay buried within its walls, a testament to the darkness that dwelled in the heart of the house. And so the tale of Sarah and Michael joined the ranks of unsolved enigmas, a cautionary whisper that echoed through the corridors of time. Detective Winters, burdened by the weight of the unknown, sought solace in the shadows, her final act a silent plea for closure. The new owners, wise to the house's secrets, chose to leave the attic undisturbed, a silent tribute to the past that lingered in the air like a haunting melody. And on quiet nights when the world slumbered and the stars whispered secrets to the moon, a faint laughter would drift through the stillness, a ghostly echo of a bygone era.